Good morning and welcome to the Landmarks Preservation Commission's public hearing and public meeting of March 14th, 2023. We'll begin this morning by taking attendance, and I will ask our General Counsel, Mark Silberman, to call the roll.
Chair Carroll.
Here.
Vice Chair Bland.
Here.
Commissioner Shamir Barron.
No.
Commissioner Chapin. Commissioner Chapin. Commissioner Chen.
Yeah.
Commissioner Devonshire.
Oh.
Oh,
Mark, you're
sorry about
reading
that.
the wrong
Whoops,
list.
sorry, wrong one. Commissioner, sorry, I got the wrong one. Oh my God, that's embarrassing. Commissioner Ginsburg.
Here.
Commissioner Goldblum.
Here.
Commissioner Master.
Here.
Commissioner Jefferson.
Here.
Commissioner Lutfi.
Here.
Commissioner Holford Smith.
Here.
Commissioner Chu.
Here.
Apologies.
All right, good morning and welcome to the March 14th public hearing and public meeting. We'll begin this morning with a public meeting to review a proposal for two designations, and the proposal is to vote to put them on the calendar for future consideration. And then we'll move to our application, our Preservation Department agenda, our public hearing and public meeting agenda for applications for work on designated properties. This meeting is being held via Zoom and live streamed on our YouTube channel. So for any of the public hearing items, you may participate by joining the Zoom meeting at the estimated time, which can be found on our public hearing agenda, which can be found on our website. Or if you'd just like to watch the proceedings, you may do so by going to our YouTube channel. And with that, I will turn it over to our Director of Research, Kate Lemos-McHale, to take us through the proposed designations.
Thank you, Sarah. Good morning, everyone. I'd just like to introduce these two proposed designations first. They're both properties owned by the New York Department, the Fire Department, and they are both historic buildings in the Bronx. They're located near Bronx Park. As you can see here on this map, they're indicated in the dark red dots. The proposed Firehouse, Engine Company 88, Ladder Company 38, and the Fire Alarm Telegraph Bureau building, Bronx Central Office. And these were both identified by the Research Department as part of our recent comprehensive survey in the Bronx, and also as part of our work to update thematic surveys, for example, building types related to certain uses. And so these both really stood out both in the Bronx and among the city's firehouses. So I'd just like to start with the first one. Item number 1 this morning is LP 2669, Firehouse, Engine Company 88, Ladder Company 38, located at 2225 Belmont Avenue in the Bronx, Block 3086, Block 38. Item proposed for the Commission's calendar is a 3-story prairie-style firehouse designed by Hertz and Talent for the FDNY and built in 1908. And presenting this morning is Lisa Buckley.
Good morning. The Engine Company 88, Ladder Company 38 firehouse was constructed in 1908 to serve the growing population of the Belmont neighborhood of the Bronx. This firehouse, designed by Hertz and Talent, is a rare example of the firm's work in civic architecture. It represents a period following consolidation when New York City employed multiple architecture firms to design firehouses, resulting in a variety of styles. And this is the only known example of a prairie school influenced design in a New York City firehouse. The firehouse is in the Belmont neighborhood of the Bronx, to the west of the Bronx Park and south of Fordham University. There are currently no designated landmarks in the area, with the exception of portions of the Bronx Zoo located within the park to the east of the neighborhood. This 1901 Sanborn map shows the location where the firehouse would be built in 1908. Consolidation of the 5 boroughs of New York City in 1898 led to an expanded and more widely professionalized firefighting force phasing out the remaining volunteer fire departments still operating in the outer boroughs. Firefighting infrastructure was needed after a period of reduced firehouse construction from 1860 until 1880. This need, coupled with population growth in neighborhoods such as Belmont, led to the construction of many new firehouses in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. The turn of the century saw the use of increasingly mechanized firefighting equipment. This firehouse represents the early transition period, built to accommodate both horses and mechanized equipment, which became more common in the early 20th century. Because of its relatively narrow mid-block location, living quarters are located on the second and third floors above twin apparatus bays and facilities designed for horses housed on the ground floor. The firm of Hertz and Talent were engaged to design the firehouse in the first years of the 20th century. The firm was established in 1897 when former École des Beaux-Arts classmates Henry Beaumont Hertz and Hugh Talent joined in a partnership on their return to New York. Hertz and Talent established themselves as theater designers and experts on fireproof building design in the early days of the 20th century, designing such notable Broadway theaters as the New Amsterdam Theater, the Booth Theater, and the now gone Helen Hayes Theater. Construction of the firehouse was completed in 1908. This would be among the last commissions of the partnership, which dissolved in 1911. Hertz and Talent's design for Engine Company 88, Ladder Company 38 is an impressive example of early 20th century civic architecture. It is the city's only known example of a firehouse incorporating prairie-style influenced design. Its planar facade articulated with deeply set windows and a grand corbelled limestone window enframement, a grand corbelled limestone window enframement and decorative brickwork executed in both standard and Roman brick. Carved stone signs above the bays identify the company. The firehouse retains most of its original features and details and has very good integrity. The design of the firehouse suggests that Hertz and Talent may have been influenced by the designs of Frank Lloyd Wright and other Prairie School architects. The Unity Temple was completed in 1906, 2 years prior to the firehouse, and was widely publicized. So Hertz and Talents were certainly aware of Wright's design. Examples of Prairie School influenced firehouses are somewhat rare, but the style was adapted to this use throughout the country, including the firehouse on the right, located in Pittsburgh and also built in 1908. The Engine Company 88, Ladder Company 38 firehouse was constructed during a narrow 15-year window between the nearly identical designs of Napoleon Lebrun and Sons and the adoption of the standardized model firehouse plan. This firehouse, designed by Hertz and Talent, is a rare example of the firm's work in civic architecture and is the only example of Prairie School influenced design in a New York City firehouse. It embraces an innovative new design expression and takes a more modern approach as compared to the firm's better known theater designs.
That's it. Thank you, Lisa. And I think the research department recommends the commission vote to calendar this for consideration.
All right, great. Thank you. So commissioners, do we have any questions for Kate or Lisa? All right, I'm going to send you all requests to unmute. And as Kate said, both of these proposals we're looking at today are proposals that came out of multiple surveys, or surveys of the Bronx, where we did a very comprehensive district by district survey last summer, and thematic surveys on firehouses. Commissioner Ginsburg.
Yeah,
please go
I
ahead.
just have a question. The firehouse is currently functioning as a full firehouse today?
Yes.
Thank you.
So, as was presented, this is an area where there are not many landmarks, as the Bronx is one of the reasons we prioritized that survey in the Bronx. And very interesting that it was designed by Hertz and Talent, who as you may know, designed the New Amsterdam Theater and I think the Lyceum. So it's interesting to see their talents in another building type. So if there are no questions, I would love if we could vote to put this on the calendar. Commissioner Goldblum, would you make a motion? Would you be comfortable making a motion to put this on the calendar?
Sure. I have to just
You just have-
find.
No, you don't have to say anything. You just have to say.
Oh, I say, oh, okay. I thought, okay, great. Yes, I do. Emphatically.
Great, thank you. And Commissioner Lutfi, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
I,
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that is officially calendared and we'll hold a public hearing in the near future. And we'll move to our second item today.
Great, thank you. Item number 2 is LP 2668, the Fire Alarm and Telegraph Bureau Bronx Central Office at 1129 East 180th Street in the Bronx, Block 4333, Lot 1 in part. Item proposed for the Commission's calendar is a 1.5-story Italian Renaissance Revival style civic building designed by Frank J. Helmley for the FDNY Fire Alarm Telegraph Bureau and built from 1913 to 1915. And I will present this one this morning for our staff person, Mary Ann Percival, working on it. The Fire Alarm Telegraph Bureau Bronx Central Office was constructed in the early 20th century as the Fire Department of New York's Fire Alarm Telegraph Bureau decentralized its operations. It was designed by the notable Brooklyn architect Frank J. Helmley and built in 1915. Its intact and highly refined Italian Renaissance Revival style design and prominent siting at the southern edge of Bronx Park lend to its striking presence. The Fire Alarm Telegraph Bureau Bronx Central Office is located in the southeastern corner of Bronx Park, indicated by the star on this map. It's in the vicinity of the designated New York, Westchester, and Boston Railroad Administration Building, the West Farm Soldiers Cemetery, and the Baird Court buildings at the Bronx Zoo. Through the 19th century, New York's fire alarm system developed to meet the needs of the growing city. The system of lookouts and watchtowers who alerted the city's volunteer firefighters by a series of bells was enhanced in 1851 when the towers were connected to each other by telegraph. The city's volunteer firefighting companies were replaced in 1865 by the professional Metropolitan Fire Department, which was succeeded in 1870 by the FDNY. At the same time, communications were improved by the introduction of a fire alarm telegraph system of public alarm boxes connected to a central office from which signals were relayed to the appropriate fire companies. So you can see some examples here from the 19th century and then some more on the right into the 20th century. Following consolidation in 1898, the FDNY's Fire Alarm Telegraph Bureau operations centered in Manhattan were no longer sufficient to handle alarms for the entire city. To improve response time, central offices were established in each borough to directly receive fire alarms and transmit the information to the appropriate firehouse. It was determined to site the new buildings in large open lots within city-owned parks to protect them from potential hazards that could impact department communications. Frank J. Helmley was a successful architect in Brooklyn. Trained at Cooper Union, he worked in the offices of McKim, Mead & White in the early years of his career. Working independently and in partnership with other architects, Helmley's body of work includes residential, commercial, ecclesiastical, and civic structures. Among his public buildings are the Prospect Park Boathouse, shown here, built in 1904, the Brooklyn Central Office, which is a twin to the Bronx buildings we're looking at today, which was built in 1913, and the Firehouse Engine Company 268 and Hook and Ladder Company 137. All of these are designated New York City landmarks. The Italian Revival style Bronx Central Office, along with its twin in Brooklyn, was designed by Helmley in 1913 and construction was completed in 1915. The T-shaped building is clad in light brick and topped by a deep terracotta cornice and hipped roof covered in Spanish tiles. Trabeated window openings along the front and side elevations have double architrave surrounds with bracketed lintels. The entrance is similarly treated and features a grillwork transom. A broad stoop leads to a recessed loggia screened by an arcade resting on a balustrade. Above the door is a name plaque, and to its side is a bronze dedicatory plaque. The side facades of each L feature a trio of large arched window openings set in an arcaded surround. The rear facade has a single arched window with similar decorative treatment. The Fire Alarm Telegraph Bureau Bronx Central Office is located within a tax lot that includes a large area of Bronx Park. The site is used to support important life safety infrastructure and has changed over time. Surrounding the proposed landmark building are several small utilitarian structures, equipment, and the aerial tower, which have all been installed in the last 20 years. The aerial tower actually moved from the other side of the building within that time. The proposed landmark site consists of the footprint of the building with all of its historic features and the lawn extending to the property line, so we can preserve that presence from the street. Little altered from its historical appearance, the Fire Alarm Telegraph Bureau Bronx Central Office is a highly intact example of the Italian Renaissance villa adapted for civic needs. The research department recommends the commission vote to calendar the Fire Alarm Telegraph Bureau Bronx Central Office for designation as an individual landmark. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. All right, do we have any questions about this item? Yes, Commissioner Ginsburg.
I'm becoming consistent. Is it currently used by the fire department, or what is the current use?
Yes, it is in current use. And so it is still serving this sort of fire alarm use that it was designed for.
Thank you.
And it, as a result, it does have this infrastructure need sort of surrounding the site with these utilitarian buildings and cables and the tower itself. All right, any other questions? Okay, so this is another really impressive firehouse. It's not really a firehouse, it's a fire alarm building, telegraph building, and very much like one that we've designated in Brooklyn, which is a fantastic landmark in Brooklyn. So I would recommend that we move to calendar this. Commissioner Chen, would you make a motion to calendar this?
I'll be delighted, just like Commissioner Goldman. I do.
Okay, thank you. And Commissioner Jefferson, would you second that motion?
Oh, so second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, so this is officially calendared. And again, we'll have public hearings on both of these in the very near future. Thank you all. And we'll now move to our Preservation Department agenda to review applications for work on designated properties. And I'll turn it over to Corey Harala, our Director of Preservation.
Thank you, Sarah. Good morning, everyone. We'll start today's Preservation Department agenda with public meeting item number 1, LPC 22-11159. This is an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 587, Lot 53, 43 Barrow Street in the Greenwich Village Historic District. This is a federal-style row house built in 1828, and the application is to construct a rooftop addition. This was last presented at the public meeting of January 31st, 2023, and no action was taken at that time. The staff will be presenting the revisions to the proposal.
Commissioners, good morning.
Sorry, Jared, I was just going to say you can go ahead and click on your screen and then you'll have access to the presentation.
Okay.
Perfect.
Okay. Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Jared Knowles with the Preservation Department staff. This proposal for rooftop addition and excavation at the cellar was last presented, as Corey said, in the public meeting of January 31st of this year. At that time, the commissioners found that the form of the addition was too complex and that it was too visible from select locations. And you had additional concerns about certain aspects of the chimneys, railings, and HVAC equipment. and so no action was taken. The proposal before you has been revised by simplifying the form and reducing the visibility of the addition by cutting 6 feet from the rear of the addition and 1 foot from the front. Reducing the height of the brick portion of the chimney, raising the height of the brick parapet at the side to conceal more of the addition, replacing the glass railing with a metal picket railing, and relocating the HVAC units. So I will show you all that. Here's a map of the historic district showing its location. And as you know, a study of the map shows that 7th Avenue South cut a diagonal swath through the gridded blocks of West Village in the early 20th century, rendering the interiors of bisected blocks to be visible from the avenue. As shown, so here are some commission approved buildings and additions to buildings that were unusual shaped lots. And this is the subject property here, also on one of these bisected lots. So you're seeing the rear elevation from 7th Avenue South. Okay. So here's the previous proposal on the left and the revised on the right, and you can see that it's been cut back 6 feet. And from the front, and in plan, you'll see that it's very clear that it's been cut back 6 feet from the rear elevation. Okay, so here's the existing section. There's also excavation work at the cellar, as shown in blue, as well as the rooftop addition. And here's the revised volume. This mock-up, this is the dotted line, indicates where it's been set back 6 feet. This is the previous mock-up from the primary elevation, and it's been revised. Here's the revision coming up. So that flag indicates the location at the front wall, and here's the montage. I think, and here's the montage from the rear. It's a standing seam, lead coated copper. So I think I'll stop there.
Okay, thank you. So commissioners, yes, Commissioner Bland, please go ahead.
Question about the cellar. Is there no cellar at all, or is it being increased in its depth?
It's being increased in its depth. Yes, it's being excavated as well.
By how much?
Maybe go back to the section, Jared.
Yeah.
It seemed to indicate that the entirety of the cellar was new, at least by the shading. That's the way I read it.
Maybe we should open it up.
Correct. Yeah, the proposal is to excavate a new cellar floor. That was presented the prior 2 times as well, and I think the commissioners did have some questions about that, and we relayed that our consulting engineer is reviewing that work, but it is an additional floor that does not exist below the current lowest level.
Oh, so it's an entire floor.
Correct.
Wow, okay. I asked just to highlight the issue that it's an old issue. It's been, here for generations, I suppose, at the Landmarks Commission, but nonetheless, it's critically important to many in the public who view this as
yeah, and this is definitely an application that is having and will continue to have enhanced engineering review, both by our consulting engineer as well as by our colleagues at the Department of Buildings.
Okay. All right, thank you.
It also makes a difference if the excavation steps in from the existing walls or if they're intended to be directly below them. The underpinning exercise is what Commissioner Bland referring to it's surgery.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And because they're party walls, it affects the neighboring houses.
Yes. Okay, so are there other questions? Okay, and I'll just note that we did receive in advance 2 letters, one from the Historic Districts Council and one from Village Preservation, and those were shared with the commissioners in advance of today's public meeting. So commissioners, as you know, this has come to us 3 times. This is its 3rd presentation that we've seen. And the first presentation was for a larger addition that sort of combined the bulkhead and the addition. And we felt that it was just too visible and too big in terms of its scale on this smaller building, but did recognize that this building was uniquely sited. It's in a row of early buildings, but it's next to a shorter building, which opens up views over the sort of obliquely over the front and side. And then because of the cut of 7th Avenue South, you have a view into the back of the block. And so there is that view where you do see an existing bulkhead already there. And the applicants, I think, have tried to show in their presentation the kind of ad hoc commercial character on 7th Avenue South, where you do look in and you see some additions, and the commission has approved a lot of kind of interesting buildings that kind of play off of those oddly shaped lots that resulted from the grid. So there are 2 views, but I think the applicant's presentation is sort of trying to show that this view is a kind of an ad hoc view in the context of ad hoc commercial and utilitarian features, including the shed on the little 1-story taxpayer in front of it. But we did recognize that it was tough. There were 2 views. It's a little building. There's no place to go in the back. So there's no way to really do a rear yard addition. And so we were concerned, but I think tried to keep the door open for them to do something. So they came back a second time and at that point tried to break up the massing of the addition and the bulkhead, and so that they'd read as less bulky and sort of discrete, 2 discrete elements. We also focused a lot on how high the masonry should be on the chimneys and whether it should be more metal or more brick. And last time, ultimately, though, found it still to be too visible, both from the front and the back. And so this is, they're back a 3rd time. They have cut it back 6 feet at the back. I wish we had sort of triple side by side so we could have seen the evolution of this. But I don't know, Jared, if you can quickly go from at least the previous view to this view, and then similarly on the front so the commissioners can see the difference. It is cut back 6 feet from the rear from the previous proposal and clad in the metal. Well, maybe actually, you know what, maybe the bird's eye is a good place to start with this, actually. So Jared, this is the current. You have the prior for this?
It's at the beginning. So.
In the meantime, Stephen, did you have another question?
Yeah, actually that view is good.
Oh,
This view is good. I'm just trying to understand the chimneys, like where are those, are they out? Does the property line step out? Are the chimneys outside of the building facade, or are they on the side walls, the party walls? I'm trying to
On the-
understand the
they're on the-
relationship of the chimneys to
Yeah,
the
both,
addition.
both are on the party walls. You know, two of them belong to the neighbor, two of them are on this property.
Ah,
But because their addition is being raised, all of them that are active must be raised at least 3 feet above structure from their proposed addition. So that's why there are multiple chimneys being raised.
and the addition walls to the right and left in this image are on top of the existing masonry wall.
At least in part, if not fully, that's correct.
Okay.
Prior versions of this addition involved different proportions of brick and metal flue. And some of the commissioners had commented really in both ways with preferences. So they tried to find some middle ground and adjusted the brick lower where it was a little more prominent. So you see more flue, and I think just made minor adjustments to the chimneys on the other side.
I guess I'm just trying to understand, because what's really visible on this view is the detail of where the brick terminates the coping and then the standing seam on top of it. I'm trying to understand because that's actually a very visible angle, because the neighboring property sets back. And if they stack, that detail becomes pretty important, the way that's going to look.
Yeah. Jared, do you have this comparable view of the previous proposal? Just
Looking up from the sidewalk. Yeah.
From 7th Avenue.
Well,
Jared,
actually, first I just wanted you to do the bird's eye view because I want to show how the bulk has changed.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry. Well, here's the parapet, and then the standing seam sitting on the parapet.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, stop. Go back a sec. Go back one slide.
Yep.
All right, Jared, what are we looking? Is this the new proposal?
Yes. This is the
Okay, so
revised.
what we were previously looking at was the previous proposal. Is that right?
Yeah.
Because the stair bulkhead was more integrated into the front plane of the addition in the previous proposal, right?
It actually, in the previous proposal, it read as a separate element. In this one, if I go back to it again, it looks more like an artist skylight, where you really see the slope is the prominent feature.
It's very hard to compare how it's changed at the front.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
It looks like it used to be 2 volumes and now it's kind of combined into one, sort of. On the back facade, it's more of a continuous volume. On the front, the sloped bulkhead interrupts it, right?
Yeah, that's correct. It read as 2 volumes before. I'll try it.
Sarah, in a way, to me, it doesn't matter how it's evolved. The question is, what is it now? And is it appropriate?
So
Just come down.
okay. Wait, well, maybe just stay here. This is the plan. So you can see, all right, so it's the stair bulkhead is now incorporated into it. Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
And so the whole thing is pulled back additional 6 feet. The wall is made continuous at the back, incorporating the bulkhead. All right, got it. And the chimneys are they've picked a middle point for the brick and the flue. Okay. Yes, Commissioner Goldblum.
I'm curious about the roof construction of this proposed addition. The interior clear height is 8 feet, which is proper, normal, minimal. But the top of the structure is 2 feet above that. Could we not have figured out a way to get that roof structure to be a little skinnier? That strikes me as a very deep assembly.
I don't know the answer, but with the current energy code, you need 8 or 10 inches of insulation, which raises that up.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I thought that historic buildings had an exemption on that, but even if you don't, how much of that needs to be uninterrupted? In other words, how much of it can be in between the joists? Things like 1.5 or 2 inches above, it's uninterrupted, and then the rest in between the joists.
All right, I think we should open it up for the applicant to answer that. So Commissioner Goldblum, would you make a motion to open the proceedings?
So moved.
And Commissioner Holford Smith, would you second that motion?
A second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, Mr. Gordon, would you be able to answer that question?
Yeah, we were planning to make the structure about 18 inches, so a foot for structure and 6 inches for insulation. Insulation does need to be continuous when you provide it. Of course, you do add it between the framing too, but the energy code requires a bit of both. And so you have continuous insulation. We're planning 6 inches of that.
So I'm sorry, forgive my thickness here, but how do you get to 2 feet?
I was planning 18 inches, not 2 feet.
All right, so then how do we get a building that's 2 feet taller than, in other words, the floor to floor, the floor to roof is 10 feet. The interior is dimensioned at 8 feet clear. So that leaves me 2 feet. So, I mean, I'm trying to figure out, can we make the structure of the roof lower so that it's less prominent? It's not, I don't really care how you do it, but I'm reacting to the views, which I think might be better if you were able to lower the roof.
We're happy to detail it to reduce the insulation and try to make the structure as efficient as possible to reduce it below 2 feet.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Any other questions?
Well, I just ask if you're doing that, you'd still comply with the energy code?
We'll try to. We'll have to see how we can get that to work. But yeah, like it was said earlier, usually you need up to 8 inches of thickness. But we'll try to. Sometimes you do things a little bit of this, a little bit of that to get the compliance in. So we'll study it.
All right, great. Any other questions? Okay, I think we'll move to our discussion now. And Jared, maybe if you go back to the street view or something where we can have as our spring point for our discussion. And so as Vice Chair Bland pointed out, there are two components to this application. There's the rooftop addition and the excavation before us. And so we can discuss both. And as Corey noted, we are having enhanced engineering review for the excavation, both by our consulting engineer and the Department of Buildings. And then the rooftop addition is pulled back more from the rear facade, 6 feet more. They've sort of tried to reconfigure the two different components in the massing and studied the visibility from the front, looking at the chimneys and the piece of the skylight, the piece of the stair bulkhead that you do see. Jared, can you go to the photo montage from Barrow Street, looking at it over Barrow? All right, Vice Chair Bland, would you like to start this one?
I will, but I'd like to see it from the 7th Avenue side. If you don't mind. Because what I'm going to say only relates to that.
Okay.
What I'm going to say is that I have no problem with the visibility from the street side, this street side. But given the extraordinary excavation below an existing basement, I guess that is, and well, regardless of that, I think it's too visible here. And I think it's asking too much of this wonderful little village house to be digging so deeply and then adding so much to the top. I accept the whole idea that there's a kind of ragtag existence along 7th Avenue. We've been there a lot as a commission, but somehow seeing this to me, is an egregious affront to the eye. Frankly, I don't see other additions on these buildings. I see other things at ground level, but not an addition up in the sky. I don't mind the chimneys at all, peering up there like that. That's acceptable to me. But the addition of the habitable space is a problem for me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And do you think there's any solution that would look like a studio window that might be appropriate here, or?
Well, maybe. I mean,
Okay.
back for a fourth time, I'm sort of, sorry about all that, but maybe, although
Okay.
those windows were usually in the front, not the
Yeah.
back, but maybe here that could work still. But it's just to me, it's just too aggressive still. So maybe that's a possibility.
Okay.
But I'm just one speaker so far, so maybe others don't have a problem.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Lutfi.
So this has been challenging from the get-go because, primarily because of this view. And I think as a commission, we've been trying to figure out ways to work with the applicant to make it work. And we've been envision as Fred referred to it, and as you've mentioned, this is kind of a ragtag street view here. And so there could be some variation. The fact that we've asked the applicant, and the applicant has, to the applicant's credit, they keep coming back and they keep working to address the concerns that we've been raising. I appreciate the fact that they're willing to go back. I happen to agree with what Fred said. There's so much excavation here, and it seems like, given that, and given what we're looking at here, it's just a bit too much. I think your recommendation, Sarah, is a good one, that maybe if it is slanted a bit, so it's more like a studio roof and window, that might work. I also think it would be great if it could come down in height.
Great, thank you very much. Commissioner Jefferson?
Well, this is an interesting architectural issue, and I see three ways of solving it, but let me stay with what he has. Pushing it back, which we always call for to push back from the rear facade, pushing it back that much makes the new penthouse a new form. And it's dominant because it's pushed back, it's a different color. It just seems like it's a new thing. And it adds complexity to this collage of buildings. And I thought last night that perhaps if they didn't push it back, if they brought it all the way to the back facade and made it a similar color, it would just blend in as a form, a simple building, but it would not do what we wanted to do, was to articulate the historic piece from the new piece. So that's a contradiction. Now, the issue for me is I think the flues are fine. They work well. I think the building itself should come up from the wall, and like the foreground building, the one with the bulkhead that has an interesting profile at the top. If that was replicated somehow, it would fit in better. It has to fit in with the context. And right now, it just doesn't,
Okay, thank you. Right, Commissioner Holford Smith?
Yes, I agree completely with what Fred had to say. I think that they're asking too much of this little building. And I think this view really shows it. Even the view from the front, the addition is still highly visible. I just think that this little building can't support such, large addition on the top and on the bottom. I'm not sure about the habitable space on the roof, but.
Okay. All right, Commissioner Chapin?
Yeah, I agree with a lot of the comments of previous speakers. I'm going to start with the basement, as Commissioner Bland did. These older buildings in the village are very important, often very fragile. And I think that the sub-basement should not be dug out as much. I think if they're going to do any excavation, it should be somewhat more limited to take, make it safer to do without interfering with the party walls and so forth. That's kind of where I'm going on. I just feel that that's too much. Because yes, we're continuing to try to find, ways to do this safely. But I don't see why they have to have the excavation be a complete wall-to-wall excavation. That's my general opinion. But anyway, on the addition on the top, I feel that it's much better from Barrow Street. I was very interested in the comments. I think that if they did pull it back toward there is a lot of visual clutter there. If they did pull it back toward the back, have it a color. This rendering, I think, does them no favors because this rendering really makes it stand out a lot. But the contrast between the black and the almost white that's probably a much deeper gray, but it just makes it very prominent. And I liked your idea, Sarah, about the studio approach or like a skylight studio approach at the back. Something like that might be possible, but I think I appreciate them coming back over and over, but I think it's still not there. And that's where I'm at.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Goldblum.
I'm with the general vibe here. I focused more on the height, obviously. The apparent height from this view, I think, stands out. And I was looking at it because I was trying to compare it with the bulkhead that was there, the bulkhead that you see on the building in the foreground, which somehow in scale relates better to the building below it than this, which feels, I think, a bit ponderous. So I'm happy to look at it again if they're so inclined. We've seen this before in the village in various places. The notion of it becomes very hard because we're used to approving things that are much bigger than this or much more intrusive than this. Yet, because of the size of the building, because of its visibility, the owner who bought it both got the benefit and the detriment of a very visible, charming, small, old building. And the spirit of the regulations is to try to minimize the incursion on that. And I think that this, even though it is relatively modest, is like Fred said, too much.
Okay. Commissioner Chen. Commissioner Chen.
Your suggestion as well earlier, maybe on the rooftop, if they want to go give it another try, is to maybe reduce it and change the material a bit. And then some of the commissioner also suggested maybe changing the angle. I don't know what the solution is, but I don't want to be giving too many design suggestions. So let's see what the rest of the commissioners feel.
Okay, thank you. All right, Commissioner Ginsburg, You did not see this the last time, but we tried to sort of show you the iterations. And so I don't know if you have thoughts here that you want to add.
Well, I just have one, as someone said, but not quite in this way, the rendering doesn't do much of a favor. If this is, I think, a standing seam, but all of one material, all those dark lines are just shadow lines, and I'm not sure you'd have that much, and it makes it look almost zebra stripe, for want of a better word. So toning that down would help. And the sort of other thing is, I understand Commissioner Goldblum's height issue. I would hate to see them get rid of height and then not meet the energy code. But there are some new thin insulations with a very high R value that should allow them to reduce it a little bit.
Okay, that's great. Thank you for that information. Commissioner Chu? Also, this is your first time seeing it, but I think you also understood quickly what the differences were and what the challenges are here.
Yeah, and I do want to say that I realize how challenging this is for the applicant too. Trying to get rooftop additions on these old houses is really not easy. I think that I agree with many of the comments that the other commissioners have made. I think that the challenge really is a proportional one. As I look at this view, this particular house, which is very old, doesn't have a lot of fabric over the windows, so that back facade is very thin on the roof. And then because the volume that's visible of the addition seems large in comparison, it seems to overpower it. I also was thinking about a comment that was made about the party wall, and I keep looking at that as well, because I think the fact that the entire volume is wrapped with what looks very contrasting material wise to even the windows itself, I want it to be simplified. I want the reading of the windows and the cladding to all read more unified, and not, because I read three elements when I look at this facade. I read the window opening, I read the copper, and then I read the brick, and it seems like a lot of stuff. So I do feel that if the wall sitting on the party wall, maybe you can look at the material difference, so it really feels like it's bookending some kind of piece, and that might help. I also think that I'm not responding well to the new volumes. It feels on one side unified, on the other it feels awkward how the sloped portion intersects the more rectilinear volume. And I wish it were more simple. If that slope went the entire way, I think it would be an improvement, and just simplify the form.
Okay, thank you. And Commissioner Master, again, this is your first turn seeing it. And I don't know if you have additional thoughts at this point.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I do commend the applicant. I know that they've been coming back several times. And when I first saw this time around, I did appreciate how they made efforts in terms of reducing the roof addition, setting it back. But I understand Commissioner Bland's point from the 7th Avenue view. Now that I'm looking at it, it is quite jarring. So I would say I'd have to agree with the other commissioners' comments.
Okay. All right, great. So thank you all for your continued efforts on this. I do think the applicants have been trying hard, and I think we have been trying to keep a door open, but it is a challenging site. I think this is a pretty early building, even in the village. It's an 1828 federal building, which is going to be a small building by age and type and style. And so that's sort of the scale of it is kind of part of its character. And so having a visible addition on a building that is of this period and style, I think has been challenging, and we've been trying to figure out how you can do that in a way that is proportional and relates to the simplicity and the scale of an early federal building. I think there are also concerns about the cumulative effect of the excavation the impact on the excavation, again, is a very early building, as well as the cumulative effect of the addition and the excavation. So I think we're not able to take an action. I don't know that we'll ever be able to achieve an addition that does everything that it needs to do with a stair bulkhead and a room up at the top and the additional room at the basement, but we can ask the applicants to think about it some more. At some point, they'll have to get an approval for something, and it may just, if that means rebuilding the bulkhead at the stair bulkhead or something, they'll have to come back with something. So we'll ask them to think hard about the comments, the question of the depth of the excavation, the height of the rooftop addition, the materiality and the form of the rooftop addition as it relates to the federal style, scale, and materials of this building, and then the cumulative effect of the two areas of work. So we'll take no action and ask you to think hard about how you can scale back and simplify. All right, and we'll now move to our public hearing agenda.
All right, we'll start with public hearing item number 1, LPC 23-02521. This is an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Brooklyn, block 393, lot 13, 216 Wyckoff Street in the Borum Hill Historic District Extension. This is an Italianate style row house built in 1870. The application is to legalize the replacement of a door without LPC permits.
Okay, commissioners, the applicants have entered the hearing and the staff will be taking you through the presentation. Janelle, you now have control of the presentation. You can advance the slides using your arrow keys and your mouse. Please state your name for the record. You may begin.
Good morning, commissioners. Janelle Gunther, preservation staff. The item before you is for 216 Wyckoff Street in the Borum Hill Historic District Extension, located mid-block on the south side of the street. I will take you through the details of the proposal.
Janelle, could you adjust your microphone, please? It's a little muffled. Thank you.
Can you hear me?
We can. It's just a little muffled sounding. I'm not sure if there's an adjustment you can make, but I think just proceed if you can.
All right, how about now?
That's better. Great.
So this first slide, so I'll just remind you that the proposal is to legalize the replacement of a door without Landmarks Preservation Commission permits. And this slide shows the changes to the entrance infill over time, beginning with the 1940s tax photograph on the left, which shows the condition prior to designation of the district. The center photograph shows modern infill present at the time of designation. There was a single leaf wood door flanked by side lights and a transom above. And the photograph to the right shows a shorter replacement door in a substitute material with a painted finish. This is a close-up photo showing the door head where the infill framing was modified to adjust for the shorter replacement door. And this last slide shows that there is a variety of doors along the streetscape as shown in this set of images of other entrance doors on the block. The applicant is here to discuss the appropriateness of the proposal and to answer any questions any of you may have.
So if the applicant is here, just go ahead and state your name for the record and please begin.
My name is Silva. I'm the owner of them.
Okay. All right. Did you want to add anything to the?
No, I mean that was it. So I had a break in. I think the designation, the block got designated landmark status in the summer of 2019, I believe. I had a break in October, so I ended up replacing the door, and I hadn't realized that.
Okay.
To apply for permission before.
Okay, commissioners, do we have any questions? All right, let's see if we have public testimony. If you're in the meeting and would like to speak on this item, please raise your hand so we can identify you, and I will turn it over to Gregory Kalla to take us through the testimony.
Thank you, Chair Carroll. We received one sign up in advance for this item, and we'll be hearing from them first. that being Lucy Levine from Historic Districts Council. So Lucy Levine, I'll be promoting you to panelist right now. And if you could please unmute your line and state your name for the public record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Lucy Levine. I'm speaking on behalf of the Historic Districts Council. HDC objects to the inappropriate materiality and configuration of this door. A new door at this location should be 4 panels, not 6, and it should be made of wood so that it will match conditions present at designation. Please replace the old door in kind. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. And I am looking through the attendee list just to see. I do not see any further hands raised. So I will just note for the record that Brooklyn Community Board 2 recommends approval. Thank you, Chair Carroll.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to turn back to the applicant. Would you like to respond to the comments? I think you did have some photographs that showed a variety of other doors in your historic district or block, correct?
Yeah.
The comment from the Historic Districts Council was that 6 panes was not as appropriate, and then only 4 panes would be appropriate. I don't know if you want to address that, and then the materiality issue as well.
So the door that was in place wasn't obviously the original door from the 1900s. It was an inside door that was actually put outside, which did make it very suspect for an additional break-in. Because it was an inside door, it's totally random that it had 4 panels instead of 6. You can see that the rest of the doors on the block are all over the place. So I don't really see that making it 4 versus the 6 actually makes it more historic, because again, this is just an inside door that happened to have been put in there at the time. The materiality, I mean, given that it's a painted door and it's actually painted in exactly the same color as it was in both cases, this is just a picture is a little bit the first one, like it looked, I mean, it looks like a painted door, so I don't really see how that changes. And again, you can see that the rest of the doors on the block are not really, like, I don't have a row of nice double hardwood doors and mine is the only one sticking out. So I feel like the change from where we started is, if anything, an improvement, let alone from a security standpoint.
And can you actually explain the material a little bit?
I don't know, some modern composite. Since I was intending on painting it, again, at the time I didn't realize that it just been landmarked. So I just did it based on how I wanted it to look, and I obviously didn't want to change a nice, 19th century house to look like a modern one. So I didn't notice the difference at all.
Okay. Commissioners, do we have any final questions? All right, I'm gonna send you all request to unmute so that we can begin our discussion. All right, and Commissioner Chen, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
And Commissioner Jefferson, would you second that motion?
So second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion. So this is a building that may have actually had double doors historically. It's 1870, which is a period when double doors were being used. And you can actually see in the tax photo, the adjacent building has at least the outer double doors. But at any rate, prior to designation and post the tax photo, the building got this assembly that has side lights and a transom. So it's a modern assembly. And the door was replaced with a new door within that assembly, which also included the trim around it. The commission has approved varying panel configurations, both in, where double doors were historically appropriate. We've approved double doors with different panel configurations. And in Greek Revival buildings where this type of door assembly is more typical, we've approved different panel configurations. And so I think in fact, the panel configuration may have even been met our rules for a staff level approval. So I think really the question for us today is the materiality and the detailing around the door, how it was inserted into the pre-existing non-historic assembly. And the applicant has, I think, said that because it's up a stoop and away from the sidewalk level, that with the painted finish, the change in material is not that perceptible. And so that's, I think the applicant's perspective on the appropriateness of this material and finish. And I think we did recently approve, Corey, correct me if I'm wrong, was it a fiberglass door in the East 25th Street Historic District, also set back from eye level with a painted finish? So we have, I think, explored other materials that replicate wood. And I think it depends on that exterior finish to a great extent. So we'll begin our discussion. Commissioner Lutfi, would you like to start this one?
Sure. As you said, we did recently approve something like this. And I have to say that was, it's a little difficult to swallow. Just because there was a wood door here. And of course, as you said, going way back, a double door. This framing was here. And so I don't have all that said, this enframement was here. There's been a modest adjustment in the height. I don't think it makes that much of a difference. I do think there are a variety of doors on this street. And this will fit in, and it does seem like this kind of smooth paint finish makes it, I'm gonna say, I would like to say imperceptible, but let's say less perceptible that it's a composite door. So I can approve it, even though it's disappointing to me.
Okay, thank you very much. Commissioner Jefferson?
I can reluctantly approve.
Okay. All right, Commissioner Holford Smith?
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree with Jeannie that, you do see it from a bit of a remove. The changes are not very, very large, and it is a modern assembly as it is. So I think that I can accept it.
Okay, Commissioner Chapin?
Yeah, I agree with the comments of previous commissioners, and I just want to, remind everyone watching, including the applicant, that if you have a change that you need to make to a historic building, come to the staff of the commission before you do it, because it saves you the time and trouble and of having to come to the commission to get a review in which you might be asked to do a complete replacement of something. So it's very important to, in terms of also, of course, the reason it's there to begin with, the landmarks law, to protect the historic property. So please come to us and don't make your changes before you do. In any event, I think that this it can be approved as other commissioners have said in this particular instance. So I will. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Goldblum.
I think it's appropriate.
Commissioner Chen.
Yeah, I'm in agreement, especially kudos to Commissioner Chapin for what she just said.
Yeah. Commissioner Ginsburg.
I agree with what the previous commissioners have said.
Okay. Commissioner Chu.
I think it's appropriate.
All right, and Commissioner Master.
I agree, it's appropriate.
Okay, so I think we are comfortable approving it in this case. It's a modest change to a pre-existing modern door and assembly, and door and its assembly. And the configuration, I think, is consistent with the variety of doors found in the district, and the finish, because it's a painted finish and seen from somewhat of a distance from the sidewalk, I think is acceptable. And we can also continue to kind of look at how it ages and think about this as we continue to look at similar applications in the future. And also, I would again like to reiterate Commissioner Chapin's point that, we are able to approve this as it's a modest change, but that's not always the case. It's not always so easy. So homeowners and applicants should really make sure that they call first to find out if they need a permit and come to us first and get the benefit of our guidance early on, so that you don't find yourself in a situation where you need to actually replace something that you've just invested in. So, but in this case, we have found it appropriate, and we'll go ahead and make that motion. Commissioner Lutfi, would you read the motion?
Sure.
Thanks.
I just want to also say before I do, thank you, Sarah and Diana, for those comments. And, this is a neighborhood where the homes are very well cared for. And it's very clear that a lot of the owners are doing the right thing. So if more people could get on board, that would be even better. Okay, so in the matter of docket 23-025-21-216 Wyckoff Street, Borum Hill Historic District Extension, an Italian 8-style row house built in 1870. The application is to legalize the replacement of a door without Landmarks Preservation Commission permits. I know that the building's style, scale, materials, and details are among the features which contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Borum Hill Historic District Extension. I also note that the modern entrance infill was installed prior to the designation of the historic district. I recommend approval. Finding that the work did not damage or eliminate any significant architectural features, that the general design and configuration of the door is in keeping with other single leaf panel doors found in this streetscape, that the modest adjustment to the height of the door and additional framing at the transom bar does not call undue attention to itself, that the substitute material of the door featuring a smooth painted finish is not discernible from painted wood when seen from the street, and that the work does not detract from the special architectural and historic character of the Borum Historic Extension.
Thank you. And Commissioner Chu, would you second that motion?
I second.
All right. And Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll.
Aye.
Commissioner Bland, I think, is left. Commissioner Chapin.
Aye.
Commissioner Chen.
Aye.
Commissioner Chu.
Aye.
Commissioner Ginsburg.
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum.
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson.
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi.
Aye.
Commissioner Master.
Aye.
Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
With 10 in favor and none opposed, the motion passes.
All right. So that's approved, and we'll move to the next item.
Next item is public hearing item number 2, LPC 23-04265, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Brooklyn, block 2010, lot 10, 520 Clinton Avenue, aka 515 to 524 Clinton Avenue and 521 to 523 Vanderbilt Avenue. The Episcopal Church of St. Luke and St. Matthew individual landmark. This is a Northern Italian Romanesque revival style church complex designed by John Welch and built in 1888 to 1891. The application is to construct an elevator addition, remove and conceal special windows, install signage, alter hardscaping, and install a ramp.
Okay, commissioners, the applicants have entered the hearing. Adam, you now have control of the presentation. You can advance the slides using your arrow keys, your mouse. Perfect. The team may begin, but please state your name for the record before you do so. Oh, wait. Okay, Adam. Adam, hang on a second. Please don't hit escape.
Okay, sorry.
So let
was
me.
Myself.
Yep. Okay. So go ahead and click on your screen. Okay. And then you can advance the slides using your arrow keys or your mouse.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Adam Poole from CTA Architects. I'd like to start by thanking the commissioners for their time in reviewing our application this morning. I'm joined by Andrew Durbridge, rector of the Church of St. Luke and St. Matthew. The Church of St. Luke and St. Matthew is an individual landmark near the Clinton Hill Historic District. It was built circa 1888, and a restoration of the exterior was recently completed under an MOU. Our project is primarily an interior renovation with a few discrete exterior elements to address barrier-free access, lighting for health and safety, and signage. The alterations are designed to have a minimal impact on the landmarked exterior. The site is composed of 3 joined buildings on different levels. To facilitate barrier-free access, we propose a new elevator addition tucked into an interior courtyard. It will not be visible from any public way. The location of the proposed elevator tower is shown here with some foundation details. I'll note that underpinning will be required and it will be overseen by a licensed engineer. The proposed elevator tower will be finished in stucco to match the adjacent wall of the parish hall shown on the right. The elevator addition will impact 6 windows, 5 of which are considered special windows. The 2 largest of these special windows, pictured on the top right, will remain and be blocked on the exterior as shown in the detailed drawing here. And I'll come back to these windows with more pictures in a later slide. The 6 impacted windows are identified here on the lower right. Special window 1 is pictured on the top right and will be removed, restored, and displayed in the elevator cab. The opening will be modified as an entrance to the elevator. Here again are special windows 2 and 3, the large ones I mentioned, that will remain in place but be blocked from the exterior. Special windows 4 and 5 will be removed, restored, and displayed in the church interior. I'll note that an earlier version of this presentation you may have seen online did not clarify where these 2 windows will be displayed, but it's shown here on the plan. And window 6, which is not classified as special, will be removed and discarded and its opening modified as an entrance to the elevator in the cellar level. Moving away from the elevator now, at the Clinton Avenue courtyard, the main entrance to the church, there's a movable church sign pictured here that we propose to replace with a new painted wood church sign, the drawing on the bottom right. Also, there is an existing concrete ramp on the north side of the site that was constructed without an LPC permit. We are proposing to legalize it. In the same area at staff level, we are proposing to replace the double doors pictured here with new wood doors and install a new actuator bollard. There is no site lighting at the Clinton Avenue courtyard, the main entrance to the church, and it can get pretty dark when people are leaving events at night. So to address health and safety, we propose 3 of these metal lampposts. And lastly, the courtyard is raised some 7 inches above the sidewalk. To bridge the distance for barrier-free access, we propose constructing a 1 to 20 walkway. It is not a 1 to 12 ramp, so it doesn't need handrails. The walkway will be surfaced with the same brick pavers found in the courtyard and bordered by the same bluestone curb. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Commissioners, do we have any questions on any component of this application? All right.
I do have a
Yes.
question regarding the lamp post. In terms of the location of the lamp post, was there thought about its relationship to the building plan, or is that due to site conditions where they were placed?
I'll go back to that slide to show you.
Thank you.
Yes, it's mostly about site conditions. In order to avoid disturbing the brick pavers, they are located in the planted areas.
Okay, thank you.
All right. And how tall are they? I'm sorry, I know you said that.
A standard lamppost height, perhaps about 8 feet.
Okay. All right, other questions? All right, let's move to public testimony. If you're in the meeting and would like to speak on this item, please raise your hand so we can identify you, and I will turn it over to Gregory Kalla to take us through the testimony.
Thank you, Chair Carroll. We received 1 sign up in advance for this item, and that being Christina Conroy from BSNY. So Christina Conroy, I'll be promoting you to panelist right now. And if you could please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Okay, good morning, commissioners. I'm Christina Conroy for the Victorian Society, New York. Now, founded in New York City in 1966, the Victorian Society in America is dedicated to fostering the appreciation and preservation of our 19th and early 20th century heritage. The New York chapter promotes preservation of our historic districts, individual and scenic landmarks, interiors, and civic art. Now, the proposed work at 520 Clinton includes 6 individual items. The VSNY is happy to support 3 of them, while the remaining 3 would benefit from minor modifications or clarifications. The construction of the new elevator tower and related window changes are entirely acceptable. The new tower will be set in an inner courtyard, which is neither visible from any public way nor seen in conjunction with any primary facade. It will be constructed adjacent to plain masonry or stucco-clad walls, and the applicants have provided clear explanations for the proposed reuse of the several historic stained glass windows. The proposed changes to the side entry and the legalization of the ramp are also acceptable as is. The work is confined to a very narrow courtyard and limited views from the street. The ramp, as installed, doesn't appear to have damaged or concealed any important historic material, and the proposed bollard will be set behind an iron fence and gate and is modestly scaled. However, we'd like to know the proposed finish for the bollard. The non-illuminated paint wood sign is modestly sized in comparison to the building, but the location seems arbitrary. Locating it approximately 5 feet south would reduce its interference with the grand triple arch entrance and its flanking towers. This would help maintain the unity of the overall entrance composition. The proposed locations for the lampposts also seem arbitrary. They may be well sited for overall illumination, but have no relation to the facades directly behind them. Now, we suggest repositioning them to relate better to the design of the church and making sure they don't interfere with the symmetry of the grand entry. We could support the addition of a 4th post if needed for symmetry and good illumination. We should also see the design of the post and base and know the overall height before any decision is made. We suggest that a height of no more than 10 feet for this type of post will assure good proportions. Finally, we find that the labels on the drawing for the ramp at the front are confusing. Image 15 is labeled proposed exterior concrete walkway location, but on the plan, the ramp is labeled new brick walkway to match existing. We support the use of brick for the ramp and ask for clarification. Thank you, commissioners.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Okay, looking through the attendees, I do not see any further hands raised. So I will just note for the record that Brooklyn Community Board 2 recommends approval. And I'll bring it back to you, Chair Carroll.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. So I'd like to turn back to the applicant and ask if you would like to respond to the comments we heard. Some were comments and some were questions, which you may be able to answer.
Certainly, I can start with the lampposts that we're looking at here. Yes, of course, we can explore relationships with the facade of the building in order to harmonize the lampposts with that facade. The second question, I believe, was the ramp here. So yes, in fact, perhaps this was an earlier version of this presentation had a concrete finish, and we have updated it to brick. Just to clarify your question, it will be a brick finish.
All right, great. Thank
and
you.
The sign, perhaps, sorry, the painted wooden sign. We can explore a slightly different location within that same planted area to draw it away from the main entrance if it seems appropriate. We want it to be plenty visible when you're entering the church, of course.
Right. Do you have a photo of the front of the church, just so we can sort of imagine the light poles, which I think
I'll go back to the very first.
I mean, I think you won't be seeing them in a static head-on elevation. As you walk down the street, you'll be seeing it from different angles, and so it'll be I think it'd be helpful, right, to sort of see how one might experience these lampposts and what their relationship might be to the building as you walk down the street. And I don't know if you can just quickly say where the 4 posts will be here.
If you see the planted areas in the front here, there's 1 lamppost per planted area.
Yep.
More or less. So 1 sort of behind this car, 1 here where you can kind of see the movable sign existing, and then 1 on the far end over on the left.
Okay. And at about 8 feet tall, they probably are not taller than the spring point of the arches on the colonnade, right?
No.
Okay. All right, commissioners, any other final questions?
Yes,
Commissioner Chu.
Chair Carroll, I just, on this image, can we kind of get a sense where the sign proposed is located as well?
Certainly. So it's also in this center planted area.
Okay.
The right where this folding sign is where the new inclined walkway, I won't call it a ramp, but inclined walkway. And the sign is proposed to be adjacent to that.
Okay. And is that in front of the smaller archway off behind on the main facade? Where is it related to?
If you were to stand directly in front of it, yes, the relationship is proposed in front of that smaller archway and the turret next to it, more or less.
Okay.
It is more about a relationship with the walkway and the entrance to the site.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
All right, any other final questions? All right, I think we can move to our discussion. So I'm going to ask you all to unmute. And Commissioner Chen, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Thank you. And Commissioner Chapin, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, so the hearing is closed, and there are really sort of 4 components to this application. One is in the interior courtyard, the construction of an elevator tower that would involve relocating and removing some stained glass windows. On the one side of the building, their proposal includes legalizing a ramp and installing an actuator in front of new wood doors that would be approved at staff level, but the ramp and actuator are before us. And then at the front, we have, actually it's three more things. On the front, we have the walkway, which is brick leading up to the entrance, a sign adjacent to the walkway that's a painted wood sign and sort of typical of the kinds of signs we see at religious institutions. And then 3 lampposts installed in the planted beds in front of the building. And we'll begin our discussion. Commissioner Holford Smith, would you start this one?
Sure. I think in general, they've done a very good job of incorporating necessary elements into the church. I think the location of the elevator is a really smart one. And I think the relocation of the stained glass, as they described it, is all acceptable. I think that the side ramp and actuator are fine, as is the inclined walkway at the front in brick. I have similar concerns that have been raised previously about the lampposts and the sign. I think it would really be beneficial to see a photograph or an elevation with these elements shown so we could see the relationship. I don't have any issue with them in general, but I think that the placement could be tweaked. And maybe that's something that could be done at staff level. Let's see what other commissioners have to say. But I think that the location needs to be considered with the building elevation and not just in plan.
Okay. All right, thank you. And Commissioner Chapin?
Yeah, I agree in general, just with what Commissioner Holford Smith said. I can approve the elevator. I think it's in the courtyard and not visible from the, ordinary from people just walking by. I think the stained glass is being preserved. The walkway is fine. The painted wood sign is, removable and, not permanent. The lampposts, I think I'm not sure about the positioning and that, maybe just work with the staff on that, because I think everything else is very satisfactory.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Goldblum?
I agree with Ann. I think that it's appropriate scheme with the suggestions that she made.
All right, Commissioner Chen?
Yeah, likewise. Yeah, I think Anne made excellent points. The lighting, it would be best to have them work with the staff.
Okay, Commissioner Lutfi?
I agree with all the comments. Working with staff, I think, will smooth out some of these issues. And I would like to say that it's so nice to see a wood sign. I mean, we've been seeing all of these electrified signs come before us in front of houses of worship. I was almost taken aback about it. And I'm very happy about it. So I'm sure the location can be figured out very easily with staff.
Okay, great. Commissioner Jefferson?
I agree with Anne's comments. I think they were appropriate.
All right, Commissioner Chu?
Sorry, I was on mute. I would agree with all the comments. I think just looking at the plan here, it does reiterate the point about the lampposts because they're not on the sidewalk. They're within the zone of the landscaping and architecture of the church. So I do feel it should respect the church plan. I do have one comment, though. I do think, and I commend the elevator access within the church because I'm sure they need it. I just wondered whether the blocking those windows had an effect to the interior of the church in terms of not having those windows there.
So let me see, James, are you around? I don't know if you can answer it. We can't have the applicant answer at this point, but if James.
Oh, right, okay, sorry.
But
Thank you,
James can
Commissioner.
answer, yeah.
James Rusiello, Preservation Staff. The special windows, so this is actually the windows that are being blocked are Redeemer Hall, which was built as a chapel and is now a parish house. Numbers 2 and 3 are currently screened off because it's used as a theater performance space. 4 and 5, the images within the presentation show.
Oh, those are the
4 and
interior
5.
spaces.
Yeah, those are interiors.
I get you.
There's a little
Okay, so
office.
all right, so there are several little spaces behind these. It's not a grand.
Whereas 2 and 3 are visible within the Great Hall of Redeemer Hall, but over a gallery. Yeah.
Okay, thank
And
you.
those will remain, right, James?
They will remain, but they will be blocked, so they
Yeah.
will not be naturally lit. Currently, there's no lighting detail behind them.
Okay. Thank you. All right, Commissioner Ginsburg.
I agree with the previous comments and with some tweaking with the staff, find it appropriate.
Okay, and Commissioner Master.
I want to commend the applicant for making it ADA compliant with the elevator and the interior and doing it so discreetly. I like a lot of the elements and how they've retained the stained glass windows. And I agree with the other comments of the other commissioners.
Great, thank you. All right, so I think we can go ahead and make a motion to approve it with the modification that they continue to work with the staff on the sighting of the lampposts and the sign to ensure that it has a relationship to the architecture of the facade. So Commissioner Holford Smith, would you go ahead and make that motion?
Yes. In the matter of LPC 23-04265, 520 Clinton Avenue, AKA 515, 524 Clinton Avenue, and 521, 523 Vanderbilt Avenue, the Episcopal Church of St. Luke and St. Matthew, an individual landmark. A Northern Italian Romanesque Revival style church complex designed by John Welch and built in 1888-1891. The application is to construct an elevator addition, remove and conceal special windows, install signage, alter hardscaping, and install a ramp. I recommend approval with some modifications, finding that the proposed work will enable barrier-free access to the church and community spaces in the least intrusive manner possible, that the installation of a shallow sloped brick walkway through the non-historic bluestone curb will allow for accessibility centered directly in front of the church's main entrance with minimal changes to hardscape, that the existing concrete ramp with railing that was constructed at the north areaway without LPC permits is significantly set back and only partially visible from the public thoroughfare and is part of the proposed overall barrier-free circulation plan, and its installation has not damaged any significant historic fabric. That the proposed installation of freestanding lampposts at the sidewalk in front of the church will recall historic lighting examples typical of a building of this age and style, that the proposed freestanding wood sign is modest in size and is a typical feature of churches in terms of material, style, and scale. That the installation of the proposed elevator addition will provide barrier-free access throughout this community facility and will be located within an interior courtyard in an area that is not visible from any public thoroughfare. That the proposed elevator addition will be finished in cementitious stucco to match the stuccoed facades of the Redeemer Hall, and the work will require removal of only a minimal amount of historic fabric. That 2 stained glass windows at the clerestory of Redeemer Hall, which are not visible from the public thoroughfare, will be blocked by the elevator addition overrun, but will be retained in place, protected with vents, waterproofed, and will remain exposed on the interior. That the 3 stained glass windows to be removed to create elevator entries will be salvaged and relocated within the complex, including 1 window within the cab of the new elevator and 2 windows within freestanding steel frames at a second-floor office, which will preserve the historic fabric and maintain a connection of these significant architectural features to the public spaces within the complex. And that the proposed work will not detract from the special architectural and historic character of the individual landmark.
However, we ask that the applicant work with staff to finalize the locations of the lampposts in front of the church and the signpost in relationship to the church facade, to the architecture of the facade.
Thank you. And Commissioner Chapin, would you second that motion?
Okay.
All right. John or Mark, you're back. Mark, will you call
Yeah.
the vote?
Haven't left yet.
Haven't left. Okay.
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Chu,
Aye.
Commissioner Ginsburg,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi,
Aye.
Commissioner Master,
Aye.
Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
With 10 in favor and none opposed, the motion passes.
All right, so that's approved, and please continue to work with the staff on the citing of those elements. And we'll now move to the next item.
All right, the next item is public hearing item number 3, LPC 23-04717, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 473, Lot 51, 136 Grand Street in the Soho Cast Iron Historic District Extension. This is a second Empire-style warehouse building designed by William Field & Son and built in 1869. And the application is to construct a bulkhead and install a window.
Okay, commissioners, the applicants have entered the hearing. Daniel, you now have control of the presentation. You just need to click on your screen. And then you can advance the slides using your arrow keys or your mouse. Please state your name for the record, and you may begin.
Good morning, commissioners. My name is Daniel Coase of Synthesis Architecture, and I'm the architect for the Ironclad Artists Cooperative, the owners of the building. We are seeking your approval for a new elevator bulkhead and a metal and glass awning for the new elevator lobby. This building is on the northeast corner of Grand and Crosby. The best way to understand this building is that it's really two buildings behind a uniform facade. 138 Grand Street on the east side of the building has an automatic elevator and its own building stair, while 136, which is on Crosby Street, has a building stair, but only a manual freight elevator located on the north corner of the building. This freight elevator will no longer comply with the building code and needs to be replaced. Their desire is to replace it with an automatic elevator. Currently, there's a center bearing wall in the building that runs the length of the building north. It's an 18-inch masonry wall with only one opening at the 5th floor level. This leaves some of the units on the 136 side of the building with no passenger elevator access and only the use of the manual freight elevator to access their units. This is again the corner from the tax photos of Grand and Crosby. This is looking north on Crosby Street, and this is indicating the location of the proposed elevator bulkhead. This is the view on Crosby Street. So here are our proposed drawings. The residents have been considering adding a roof deck for the use of all the people in the building. In order for this to be built, it must be accessible to all the residents, including those in wheelchairs, according to the building code. So for ADA access, it requires, if they would like to take the elevator up to the roof, and that is why the elevator bulkhead is proposed at 20 feet, 7 inches tall. You can see that in the upper photographs where it's been sketched in. We did taken a measured pole up to the existing elevator bulkhead and located it on the 4 corners, well, on the 3 corners of the bulkhead, because access to the edge is dangerous. And we didn't feel that building a scaffolding mock-up was the safest thing to do. So we did hold the pole up, and in each of the photographs, we have removed the line so that you can see the actual pole to confirm the artist's rendering of the mass of the bulkhead. Views 2 show the bulkhead as it would appear from somebody standing looking north on Crosby Street. View 4 is directly across the street from the proposed lobby at the lower level, and you will see the elevator bulkhead on the top. And the last is the view from the north looking south, where you do see the north wall of the building. We are proposing to set the elevator bulkhead back from this north wall so that we're not touching the historic fabric. You will perceive the original height of the elevator shaft, and the bluestone coping that is at the top of that brick wall will remain. You'll see that again, and well, you can see it in this technical drawing as well, how it's stepped back from the north side. The elevator cab is a 9-foot cab. There are artists in the building that still move art and do require the height. It's currently a 12-foot elevator cab, so that height has been reduced. We have a minimum overrun to the elevator equipment and a minimum 8-foot ceiling height in the machine room. There are other bulkheads visible in the area. This is 1 block south on Crosby Street at Howard, where you can see 3 buildings that have rooftop additions, some with elevator bulkheads or assumed elevator bulkheads. This is the building 1 block north on the corner of Broome and Crosby. They've put in a rooftop addition that you can see here. There is elevator access, and you can see right behind the elevator pole in the top photo, the bulkhead is visible from the street. Here are the technical drawings for the existing on the left-hand side and the proposed conditions on the right-hand side. We will be extending the masonry walls up to the required height. Currently, the bulkhead is covered in roofing with silver paint. That will all be removed, and a gray acrylic stucco will be used for the entire surface of the bulkhead. We're thinking that the gray is the best color to pair with the gray of the building and a color of winter sky. I will continue on to the awning that is proposed over the entrance. This is the top are the existing conditions. Behind the double doors on the left-hand bay is the elevator access currently. We'll be taking down all of the masonry infill and putting in a wood and glass infill, not touching any of the historic cast iron. The awning will be over the entry doors in the north bay, and because there are 15 bays along Crosby Street, the desire is to some way mark the entrance and also provide some shelter to those people coming and going. Here are some 3D renderings. The awning will be made of aluminum in the tradition of loading dock roofs. The structure will be exposed. The aluminum in its natural state will complement the gray of the facade, and the infill panels are a white laminated glass, and the fittings will be cast aluminum fittings. It projects 6 feet from the building to provide shelter and some light, and the white laminated glass will obscure any dirt that may land on the horizontal surface. This is an awning that's across the street in a more modern style, and these are 2 awnings on Mercer Street, one in the traditional style, covered in a corrugated metal with the exposed steel painted to match the building. The northern one is the more modern version, but both reflect the area that does have these former loading dock awnings. The historic nature of Crosby Street, we don't think will be negatively impacted by the addition. There's an irregular roof line with a variety of different buildings along Crosby Street. The taller elevator bulkhead, while visible, will not detract from the landmark elements of the building and will become one more rooftop element. This concludes my presentation.
Thank you very much. Commissioners, do we have any questions? Yes, Commissioner Jefferson, please go ahead.
Just one technical question. The machine room, could it be in the basement or could it be lower?
We have explored alternatives. The elevator companies do not generally offset the mechanical equipment in the basement, and this building does have a cellar and a subcellar. So that was our first thought. It would be such a custom elevator because it's out of the norm that it almost doubled the price in the elevator company's original estimation. So that's why you're seeing the elevator as a modification to the existing elevator that's there.
Thank you very much.
All right, other questions? All right, I don't see any hands raised, so we'll move to public testimony. If you're in the meeting and would like to speak on this item, please raise your hand so we can identify you, and I will turn it over to Gregory Kalla to take us through the testimony.
Thank you, Chair Carroll. We received a couple of signups beforehand for this application, so we'll be going through those first. The first signup we'll be hearing from is Lucy Levine from the Historic Districts Council. So Lucy Levine, I'll be promoting you to panelist right now. And if you could please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Hi, Commissioners. My name is Lucy Levine. I'm speaking on behalf of the Historic Districts Council. HDC is surprised by the proposed height of this elevator overrun, which seems unusually tall. We are unclear why such height is necessary when the elevator does not appear to need to open onto the roof. Given that the bulkhead is so highly visible, we believe that the applicant should give more attention to its shape and cladding so that it relates to the pitched roof accretion on the other side of the building. As for the awning, we find the precedent images more appropriate than the proposed solution. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for your testimony. Next up, we'll be hearing from Christina Conroy from VSNY. So Christina Conroy, I'll be promoting you to panelist right now. And if you could please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Okay, good morning, Commissioners. I'm Christina Conroy for the Victorian Society, New York. Now, the application for 136 Grand Street has two independent components, which we found required two separate responses. We support the construction of the proposed extension to the elevator tower. We note that placement of this extension is determined by the location of the historic elevator shaft, built close to the street to allow easy delivery of raw materials to the upper floors. And its extensions and the simple materials will not draw undue attention to themselves and away from the beautiful and lavish cast iron detailing of the lower floors. But we cannot support the construction of the proposed awning. It uses materials and details copied from historic sidewalk canopies, but the applicant doesn't seem to have considered the way the design of the historic sidewalk canopies reflected the way that they were used. Now, sidewalk canopies on industrial buildings were generously sized to give protection to a wide loading dock. The bay where the applicants proposed to install this awning is only 6 feet wide. In the 19th and early 20th century, no one would build a loading dock 6 feet wide as it would be too small to hold a reasonable amount of merchandise. As a 6 foot wide loading dock would be too narrow to be useful, a 6 foot wide canopy would also be too narrow. Now, we find that just copying details of historic sidewalk canopies without really looking at the way they were used has yielded an awning which is ill-proportioned. We urge the applicants to give up the idea of referencing these historic canopies. The applicant provided us with a photo of a simple modern canopy at the entrance to a building at 31 Crosby Street. We encourage them to use this as a model for their awning here. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your testimony. And looking through the list of attendees, I do not see any further hands raised. So I will just note for the record that Manhattan Community Board 2 recommends approval. And I will give it back to you, Chair Carroll.
Okay, thank you. So I'd like to turn back to the applicant, Mr. Coase, and ask if you'd like to respond to the comments.
So I would say that my client was interested in a wider canopy, but we hesitated to propose it as it was more of an intervention and spanning the cast iron column between the two bays was something we thought would not be acceptable. So we would entertain a larger canopy. As far as the questions about detailing, I think it speaks for itself, and we have done our best to understand the way structure and planar infill combine, and that we do think this is a good intervention sitting on this facade.
Okay, and since it was raised, can you show us the canopy at 31 Crosby that was mentioned in the testimony?
There you go.
Okay, so it's a sort of more horizontal metal canopy.
Right.
As opposed to a sloped. Okay. All right, commissioners, do we have any other final questions? Okay, then I think I'm going to ask you all to unmute so we can move toward a discussion on this one. Great, and Commissioner Lutfi, would you make a motion to close the hearing? Excuse me.
So moved.
Thank you. And Commissioner Master, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Okay. Any opposed? Okay, the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion. And this application has two components. One is to raise the existing elevator bulkhead to accommodate the new elevator and mechanical components, and then the other is to install a metal canopy or awning at the one storefront bay on the Crosby Street facade, which, you know, the commission has long recognized that these industrial buildings had loading bays, particularly on the through block buildings that face Broadway, often on their Lafayette or Crosby Street or Mercer Street elevations and Crosby Street elevations. There were canopies. And the commission has approved them in single bays as sort of a contemporary interpretation of those and sort of based on the precedent of a projecting element and not necessarily an exact replica of a historic loading bay canopy. And so we'll look at this in terms of its proportions and its detailing and its materials and its relationship to the building as we would in any case. So we'll go ahead and have that discussion. Commissioner Chapin, would you like to start this one?
Okay, I think the bulkhead is fine. I actually agree with the testimony that either if you're going to do this type of canopy kind of referencing the larger canopies that are used for loading dock, that it should be a longer one, which the applicant said they'd be willing to do. Or alternatively, just, even have this be even simpler and more referential to, other canopies that are just canopies in the district. So That's kind of my take on it. I don't know which way others will go, so we'll see.
Okay, so it's because of the slope and the armature, it is.
Yeah.
So it may be.
I think it, for me, it's kind of, yeah, really referencing what you would see for loading docks. And, you know, I'd say, yeah, go ahead and make it larger, more like a loading dock, and extend over maybe the whole facade actually, or go with something that looks, it's a little, just a straight across canopy, similar to the one that they showed at 31 Crosby.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Goldblum.
I think Diana's right. And what I'm focusing on with the canopy is the detailing of the material. It looks like it's a box type frame with a fairly unarticulated, very brittle looking brace. I think that the applicant should look with the staff at other examples and make it a little more intentional. I think it's got a kind of desiccated quality to it that seems like it could be improved with some thoughtful detailing. It reminds me of this canopy that we saw a few years ago. I forget exactly where it was, where they used like the corrugated glass. Remember that one? It's very. Yeah. It might have been on Crosby Street too. I mean, it was in a kind of industrial area, but it just had some kind of interest and commitment to the engaging in the neighborhood conversation that I think this one at the moment lacks. So I think they can work with staff on that, and I think the bulkhead is acceptable.
Okay, thank you. All right, Commissioner Chen.
Yeah, I mean, agreement with the earlier comments. Yeah.
All right, great. Commissioner Holford Smith.
Yes, so I agree about the elevator bulkhead. I think that's acceptable. My my initial reaction to the canopy was that normally this type of a canopy, whether it's a loading dock, are typically supported from above, not from below. And I think that was something that kind of threw me off. Where normally you would have the bracing back to the facade, rather than sort of supporting it like an awning. But I think there have been other comments about the canopy.
Okay.
And I agree that I would be fine with it spanning across those 2 or 3 bays, or being a simpler canopy over the entry.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Lutfi.
I think the bulkhead is absolutely fine. And with the canopy, I guess I feel like it sounds like the applicant was trying to do something that they thought, you know, in its smallness would be easier to approve. This canopy is an entrance to a residential building. So from a use standpoint, the most important thing is that it covers that part of the entryway. So I actually don't have a problem with the size of it. If all the other commissioners, you know, would prefer to be larger, that's fine. I do think that the slope seems a little consistent with what exists in the area, and I think that the applicant could work with staff on modifying it so that it's straight and, you know, very understated. The materiality seems very understated to me.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Jefferson.
Yeah, the structure of the canopy seems to be one that's used mostly for canvas canopies, lightweight. It has this lightweight quality to it, where it should have a heavier, stronger, muscular to go with the facade of the building. So I think the structure needs to be heavied up a little bit to go with the rest of the facade.
Okay. All right, Commissioner Chu.
I agree with the other comments. I think the bulkhead is acceptable. In terms of the street canopy, I also agree that if there is an intent to make a design move out of it, then perhaps extending it to the 3-bay would address the whole building facade in a more intentional way. I think just one out of the 3 makes me feel like it should be, if there were only one of the bays, it should be minimized in its expression and be more subservient to the existing facade. And I agree with Commissioner Halford's comment about the structural solution here. That was my immediate reaction, as I felt it was not in keeping with the top suspended precedences we see around.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Ginsburg.
I agree the bulkhead is fine. On the canopy, I agree suspending it instead of bracketing it would be good. I don't have a big issue with it just being on the 1 bay, but it could be extended to all 3 bays that are shown here. I would not extend it farther.
Okay, thanks. Commissioner Master.
I agree that the bulkhead is fine. In terms of the canopy, I'm fine with it on 1 bay, but I will defer to what the other commissioners decide. But it makes sense that they work with the staff to figure it out.
Okay. All right, so I think we can go ahead and make a motion to approve this application with the condition that they continue to work with the staff on the canopy, either exploring making it wider like a traditional sidewalk canopy, and also consider how the armature works in that typology, or to simplify it for a single entry. And again, that would involve restudying the details and the armature type as well. So let me go ahead and see if I can make a motion that does that. Okay, in the matter of LPC 23-04717, 136 Grand Street in the Soho Cast Iron Historic District Extension, a second Empire style warehouse building designed by William Field and Son and built in 1869. This is an application to construct a bulkhead and install an awning. And I note that the building style, scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Soho Cast Iron Historic District Extension. I recommend approval, finding that the proposed work will not eliminate any significant architectural features, that the simple massing and materials of the gray stucco clad bulkhead extension will be in keeping with utilitarian bulkheads found at buildings of this type, style, and age throughout this historic district, that the bulkhead extension will be seen from public thoroughfares in the context of the existing bulkhead at this large building, as well as other rooftop accretions and adjacent taller buildings, and will have a discrete presence in the surrounding roofscape. That the proposed metal and glass awning that the presence of a proposed metal and glass awning would be in keeping with simple modern awnings and marquees installed at buildings of a similar age and style, and would be harmonious with the industrial character of the historic district, and that the proposed work will not detract from the special architectural and historic character of the building or the Soho Cast Iron Historic District Extension. However, we recommend that the applicants work with the staff to restudy the canopy, either considering making it wider and following the details for the armature and framing that would be more closely related to a loading dock canopy, or as a single entry to simplify it, also restudying the details of the armature and the way that it is hung, particularly suspending it from the top and not bracketing it from below, its slope, and its again, its details. All right, so I think I got that close. Commissioner Chapin, would you second that motion?
A second.
Thank you. All right, Mark, will you call the vote?
John's here.
John.
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Chu,
Aye.
Commissioner Ginsburg,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Holford Smith,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi,
Aye.
and Commissioner Master.
Aye.
10 in favor, none opposed, the motion passes.
All right, so that's approved with some modifications. So just please continue to work with the staff on the canopy detail, the right proportion, slope, and materials to relate to this building and the surrounding context. And we'll now move to the next item.
The next item is public hearing item number 4, LPC 23-05766, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, block 573, lot 53. 17 West 9th Street in the Greenwich Village Historic District. This is an Italianate style townhouse built in 1854 to 55 and altered in 1918. The application is to alter the facade, install a stoop, modify masonry openings, construct a rear addition, remove a studio skylight, and excavate the rear yard.
Commissioners, the applicants have entered the hearing. Andrew, you now have control of the presentation. You can advance the slides using your arrow keys or your mouse. The project team may begin, but please state your name for the record before you do so.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Mary Diericks, Preservation Consultant for the project. Presenting with me is Andrew Percival of Span Architecture. And also in the Zoom to answer questions if needed are Karen Stoneley and Peter Pelsinski of Span Architecture. Andrew, if you would go to the next slide. And that's the location. And then the next slide. Here's the building in context. It's the one with the bay window. It's a mixed block with 19th century townhouses and 20th century apartment buildings. This is a renovation and restoration of the townhouse. The public hearing items, as mentioned, are the front entrance and stoop, alteration of the rear 2 floors and of the top 2 floors on the addition, and excavation and lowering of the rear yard and removing the studio window skylight at the roof. Next. The house was built as a single townhouse rather than a part of a row in 1852 to 53. The well-known sculptor and painter William Zorak and his wife Marguerite, the painter and textile artist, lived here in the 1930s, just the 30s. By 1940, they were on Hicks Street in Brooklyn. The house has had alterations. The stoop was removed before 1940, as you can see in the 1940 photo. At that time, the front bay was resurfaced with sheet metal, and I think probably extended a floor up. The windows were replaced with the multi-paned ones that you see. Next. This is the building today. You can see the marking on the brick where the old entrance was on the right. Next. This is the current ground floor of a lovely fence, which we're keeping and which amazingly was not even in the 1940 photo. Next. This is the block plan showing the architectural diversity of the block with the 19th century townhouses and the larger 20th century apartment buildings extending into the rear yard. Next. This is an aerial view showing the variety and the variety in yards especially. Next. This is a close-up of the immediate neighbors. I want to say we're not adding to the building. It sounds like we are. That L addition is there already. But what we are doing is lowering the rear yard. This shows the yards are small and they're all enclosed with high fences and they're at various levels. The yard at number 17 is actually shorter than the others. It's not a typical townhouse yard, although it was originally. Sometime before 1885, the rear part of the yard was sold to 18 West 10th Street, the building right behind it. That building was the home of the family of Emma Lazarus. Next. Andrew Percival of Span Architecture will take you through the design.
Thank you, Mary, and thank you, commissioners, for your time today. This is the existing front elevation of the building with a couple of buildings worth of context shown on either side. And then this is the proposed front elevation, again, with a couple of buildings shown either side. And now this is the side-by-side existing on the left and proposed on the right. So the general moves that we're making at the front facade that are not public hearing items, general window replacement of all the existing historic windows and the trim restoration around these windows. We'll also be removing the AC units and repointing the brick and repairing trim as required across the facade. At the roof, you'll see that we have a new stair bulkhead and a new elevator bulkhead, both of which have associated chimney flue extensions. Neither of these bulkheads or their flue extensions are visible from the street, and they are not public hearing items. At the roof, we also have a new glass railing with a non-reflective coating on it. This has been set back far enough from the facade that it is also not a public hearing item. The public hearing items on the front facade are focused at the base of the building. So this is the new stoop and areaway reconfiguration that's associated with the addition of the new stoop. The stoop itself is to reintroduce that historic entry to the building at parlor floor level. The stoop will be a cast stone to match the existing brownstone that's there. And then at the top of the stoop, there'll be a new wooden glass door and cast stone enfrainment around it. The railing as well that Mary noted, the non-original but very nice railing that's around the areaway. We're going to be maintaining that and adjusting it as required for the stoop reconfiguration. This is now a blow up of the existing and proposed stoop and areaway elevations. So you can see here the enfrainment around the entry door at the top of the stoop. We're proposing to be in the Italianate style as the building was originally. We are referencing elements of the Italianate elements of the building in this enfrainment. So the pediment at the top of the door has a slight curvature to match the historic window trims above. And then the brackets on either side at the top of the doors are referencing the equivalent brackets on the cornice at the top of the building. We're also proposing a new light fixture in the door entryway. The existing and proposed areaway plans show the work that we're doing here is kind of all in an effort to do this reconfiguration with the stoop addition. So that includes moving the stairs down to the areaway. We will be maintaining an entry at garden floor level along with the new entry at parlor floor level. So there's a new security gate to get into the area under the stoop. All of the other work that we're proposing in the areaway will be done in kind with what's existing. So where we're removing the areaway hatch, the new pavings will all be bluestone slate to match what's there. Any work on the building facade to fix any of the brownstone will also be done in kind with what's existing. At the west end of the areaway, just down here, you can see we're also proposing a new trash enclosure. This is the elevation of the stoop. So you can see that security gate providing access to the understoop area. There's also a new light fixture at this location. And the railing up the stairs obviously does not exist right now because the stair does not exist. The railing that we'll be proposing at this location will match the railing that is already existing on the around the areaway. This is the elevation looking the other way. So this is looking towards where that trash enclosure will be located. I'm now going to hand back to Mary to talk about the rear facade existing conditions and then the roof existing conditions.
Here's the rear facade. On the left, what you're seeing is the main building. So that's looking toward the building. On the right, you're looking at the existing rear addition, which is the typical L addition. You can just see the two additions on the L addition at the top two floors. These are the two top floor extensions at the rear L. they're not in good shape. And they weren't well constructed. I will say, though, they've been there for a really long time. On the top right is the top floor of the main building, which I believe was raised maybe in the early 20th century. It probably would have been the height of the building next to it. Not that we're doing anything about it, but just so you know. Next. You're looking at the full size of the rear yard on the left. That's looking, through the rear door into the yard. It's small. And then you can see the yard from above. That L addition is on the left. And then you can see the adjacent yard, which is the adjacent yards, which are varying heights and all enclosed. Next. These are the yards to the north and to the east, also kind of varied and fenced and varying heights. Next. Here's the roof showing the rear skylight, which is being removed. It was constructed in 1917-18 as a studio window, but it's been altered at least 3 times since then, kind of in a major way. This isn't visible from the street. It's at the back of the roof. Next. So here are 3 plans. In 1918, it has a peaked roof and it faced the front, which is south. By 1984, the roof stayed peaked, but the glazing moved to the back, facing north. It was also likely made a little shorter in height. By 2023, the roof is a shed roof and not a peaked roof as it was, and the glazing still faces the rear. It doesn't really look like a studio window, but more like a kind of a tallish skylight. Andrew Percival will now take you through the designs for the rear.
Thank you, Mary. So on the page right now, you're looking at two images of the rear facade. On the left, we've included, there's a large ginkgo tree at 18 West 10th Street, which does obscure the majority of the view of the rear facade from the back of the block locations. But then on the right, we've just taken that tree away for clarity so that we can actually talk through the scope that we're proposing and so that you can see what we're going to be proposing. In terms of the general moves on the rear facade, we'll be stripping the brick back. So there's an existing paint that's peeling that we'll be taking off. And then all of the upper floor windows, we're going to be maintaining the historic opening sizes, but doing window replacements in them. The 2 new windows in the masonry portion of the rear addition on the 2nd floor level are new but historic in size to match those on the historic facade. We'll also be maintaining and or repairing as required all historic brick cornice detailing on both the extension and on the historic building facade. The public hearing items on the rear facade are the 3-foot lowering of the rear yard, which we'll talk about more when we're looking through the building, existing and proposed building section. The 2-story window system at garden and parlor floor level adjacent to the rear yard. The 2-story extension replacement at the 3rd and 4th floor levels, and then the removal of the roof skylight as part of the roof reconfiguration. So on the left, looking first at the rear yard work, we're proposing lowering the rear yard by approximately 3 feet, which we'll go through the reasons for that through when we look at the existing and proposed sections. Important to note, though, as Mary kind of drew attention to, is the fact that our property is about 10 feet shorter than every other property. Our yard is not uniform with the other yards in the block, both in plan size and then also in elevation, where many of the other adjacent yards, including our direct neighbor to the east, are as much as a full story lower than ours currently are. Facing into the rear yard, we're also proposing a new 2-story window system. It'll be a metal framed window system, dark bronze in color, and we'll be making sure to express a horizontal mullion at the historic parlor floor level so that there's not kind of 2-story pieces of glass or anything like that, even at the location where we do have a double height space behind the building facade. At the 3rd and 4th floor levels, we are proposing our two-story extension replacement. As Mary described, the existing extensions at 3rd and 4th floor level are in poor condition and were poorly constructed in the first place. We're proposing to keep the volume of the additions the same as it is, but switching now to a lightweight and temporary feeling metal and glass structure. The frame color will, again, it'll match that of the lower two-story glass system we're proposing. So it'll be a dark bronze color, so the two systems relate to one another. And the reason for going for this kind of metal and glass temporary lightweight structure is so that we can allow the historic building facade to be read through it, so that you can read that historic building facade in its entirety across the full width of the property in a way that is impossible to do right now because of the existing additions. To emphasize this, we're also making sure that where we're stripping the paint back on the exterior so that you're seeing exposed brick, we'll be doing the same on the interior so that the materiality is continuous from exterior to interior. And then at the top of the 4th floor addition, where the roof line is, the existing 4th floor addition has a kind of real roof buildup that means that it's currently obscuring the brick cornice detailing at its location. The waterproofing for the existing roof runs straight over the existing brick detailing and onto the roof of the existing 4th floor addition. Our proposed addition switches this roof structure to be a glass roof structure instead, so we can really skinny up the roofing and allow us to pull the roof of the addition below that brick cornice line so that the historic building height and cornice can be read from party wall to party wall, from property line to property line. Also at this location, as with the front facade, we're proposing non-reflective glass railings at the rear terraces and at the roof terrace. This is the existing rear facade with a couple of buildings of context shown on either side. The proposed rear facade with the same context. And now a side-by-side showing the elements we just discussed when looking at the 3Ds. Because when we were looking at the 3Ds, we didn't talk through the skylight. So on the left, you can see the existing skylight at the roof level projecting much higher than the existing roof does. We're proposing to remove that to create an occupiable roof terrace that is accessed through the 2 bulkheads that were discussed as not being public hearing items. In terms of the building facade itself, though, you can see on the left, the comparison between the left and the right, where we have our new glazing systems at the parlor and garden floor levels, and then at the 3rd and 4th floor extensions is where the facade as it is right now is in its kind of most disorganized state and most materially inconsistent. So the openings at the parlor and garden right now are not historic in size or location, and the same with the 3rd and 4th floor extension. This is the existing building section. So to talk through the reasons for lowering the rear yard by approximately 3 feet, we're converting this building into a single-family townhouse, the garden floor for which is intended to be one of the principal living spaces in the townhouse. The existing garden floor clear ceiling height is about 8'1", and this doesn't allow for any mechanical drop ceiling, any light fixture installed in a drop ceiling at all. This is not enough for a principal living space for a house of this style. So we'll be proposing dropping that, which you'll see on the next slide. Also worth noting on this slide is the fact that the existing cellar has under 6 foot of clear ceiling height. The existing 4th floor has very generous clear ceiling heights because of the pitched roof. And then again, you can see on the elevation of the extension how kind of disorganized in nature the windows and the rear extensions at 3rd and 4th floor level are. This is now the proposed building section. So where before we had 8'1" of clear ceiling height in the garden floor, now we're closer to 10 feet, again, not including mechanical and light fixture drop ceilings. So we're proposing dropping that garden floor by just shy of 3 feet to achieve this new ceiling height. When we drop the rear half of the garden floor to do this, we then in turn drop the rear yard as well, so that you step out from the rear half of the garden floor and down into the rear yard rather than up. The knock-on effect of dropping the garden floor is that then you reduce the existing cellar from 6 feet clear height to 3 feet clear height, which is why we're also proposing separate to the public hearing application, or not separate to it, but not as a public hearing item, rather, the 5 foot worth of underpinning to lower the cellar, and then the underpinning associated with the new elevator bulkhead as well. Finally, just to note, even though it's not a public hearing item, the roof elements, you can see the dotted line here showing the visibility from directly across the street, and how all of the roof elements we're proposing have been set back such that they're set back and recessed into the existing roof line such that they're not visible and therefore not public hearing items. And that's our presentation. Thank you for your time.
Great, thank you very much. Commissioners, do we have any questions for the applicant? I don't see any hands raised, so I don't think we have any questions at this time. We may later, but we'll now move to public testimony. And if you're in the meeting and would like to speak on this item, please raise your virtual hand so we can identify you. And I will turn it over to Gregory Kala to take us through the testimony.
Okay, thank you, Chair Carroll. We received one sign up in advance for this item, that being Jeremy Woodoff from the VSNY. It appears as though Jeremy Woodoff may be having some difficulties. Okay, so it appears as though Jeremy Woodoff may be experiencing some difficulties. I think he's back now. So Jeremy Woodoff, I'll be promoting you to panelist right now. And if you could please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you will have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Hey,
Hello, Jeremy.
yes, I'm here. 1 second to pull up the testimony. Thank you. Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Jeremy Woodoff, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Victorian Society, New York. The Victorian Society supports all alterations proposed for 17 West 9th Street. The changes to the front facade will leave intact the significant features cited in the designation report: the elaborate window cresting, the 3-story polygonal bay window, and the unusually rich bracketed roof cornice. The new stoop, door, and door and frame are well proportioned and detailed. Removing the 20th century brick used to close the wall when the original entrance and stoop were removed will not destroy any significant historic material. And eliminating through-the-wall HVAC sleeves from the front facade of a 19th century row house is always desirable. We note that unlike some early 20th century alterations to row house facades, the work on this one doesn't appear to represent an architecturally significant comprehensive redesign. And we believe, therefore, that the return of this house to its original appearance by reconstructing the stoop is appropriate. The removal of the modern, poorly designed accretions at the rear facade is not only reasonable, but also desirable. And we're pleased that the masonry window openings on the upper 3 floors will remain intact. Finally, we are grateful for the remarkably clear information the architects have provided, proving that the rear-facing studio window, original to the 1918 renovation, has been altered so often it can now be seen as a modern addition. We can find no pictures of a mock-up or sightline views of the rooftop additions other than from directly across the street. Our recommendation for approval of these additions is contingent on there being no more than minimally visible. Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you so much for your testimony. And next up, we'll be hearing from Anna Markham from Village Preservation. So Anna Markham, I'll be promoting you to panelist right now. And if you could please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you will have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Hello, Commissioners, and thank you for the opportunity to testify. Village Preservation commends the sensitive restoration of the building facade. We are thrilled that the historic stoop will be reconstructed. However, the proposed rear facade addition is wholly inappropriate for the building. The immense glass panes are entirely incongruous with the historic character of the neighborhood. Our concern about the rear addition extends to the excavation necessary for its construction. As we have stated many times before, we are deeply concerned about the potential for destabilization of the historic structure, as well as the adjoining structures on this block. We have seen this happen too many times before in our historic districts and are reluctant to support any kind of work that includes this sort of excavation going forward. We urge the applicant to rework the proposal for the rear design and return to the commission at a later date. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much for your testimony. And I'm looking through our attendees list now, and I do not see any further hands raised. So I will note for the record that Manhattan Community Board 2 recommends approval of the front facade restoration, the entrance and stairs and areaway modifications, approval of the rear facade modifications and the windows on the lower floors, approval of the modest of excavation, provided that if the underpinning of the neighboring property is required, that it conforms to all regulations and be done with the greatest of care to avoid any damage to the house or the neighbors. Approval in this exceptional case of the placed glass in the upper floor punched openings to harmonize with the glass below and the L addition. And lastly, approval of the addition with the L with special commendation that the rear wall is visible within the glass rooms. And with that, I'll bring it back to you, Chair Carroll.
Okay, thank you. And I'd like to turn back to the applicant team and ask if you'd like to respond to the comments we've heard.
Yes, thank you. We thank all three organizations for their support, or mostly their support. And we do want to say that we did do a mock-up, a full mock-up of the bulkheads and the railing, and staff came out to look at it and looked at visibility. So that was done. You just didn't see it in the presentation. The rear, the excavation is modest at 5 feet, and of course, and we have engineering drawings right now in the appendix. But of course, all the rules for underpinning will be met. The rear changes to the lower floors. They do respect with the mullions. They respect the floors, so you can clearly see what is the basement floor and what is the first floor. They're not solid sheets of glass, and the corner is expressed also in a architectural element. So we feel that this is as appropriate as the rest to the building.
Whoops, thank you very much. Okay, commissioners, do we have any final questions? All right, I'm going to send you all requests to unmute so that we can begin our discussion. So, Commissioner Lutfi, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
And Commissioner Ginsburg, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion. And so this proposal, the portions of it before us include the restoration of the stoop at the front facade and the creation of a new entry at where one would have existed historically prior to the early 20th century redesign of the building, which resulted in the removal of the stoop and a basement entrance created. And then at the rear, the excavation of the rear yard. And I would note that the excavation is going to be getting enhanced engineering review from our colleagues in the forensic engineering unit at the Department of Buildings. And that the amount of excavation is under the building itself actually technically meets the rules for a staff level approval. But it's the excavation in the rear yard, lowering the rear yard below the existing grade is something that just isn't covered under the rules. So that is the piece that's technically before us. But of course, whether it's staff level or commission level, all excavation is being carefully analyzed before any permits are issued. And then the creation of the wraparound wall, which we have done in some other instances with on the lower floors of rear facades and Ls. And then the replacement of the existing two additions on top of the L with new glass additions. So we'll begin that discussion. Commissioner Goldblum, would you like to start this one?
Sure, thank you. Okay, I think that the front facade work, I mean, it's interesting because it's very aesthetically pleasing what they're proposing. There's no question to that. It's a pretty building. I mean, there is historicity though to the renovation that was made in the 20th century. And even though, I mean, we have allowed people in the past to kind of pick their period. And I think this is a case where they're doing that. They're saying, I want to go back to that and I want to alter the 20th century modifications to a certain degree. And I guess I think it's okay. I mean, if it weren't so nice looking, I think it'd be harder to say that it's okay, but I'm okay with it, even though maybe I shouldn't be. That the rear, I mean, the rooftop stuff is fine because the visibility is minimal. I think that the rear, that top cube of glass just looks ridiculous. I think that I don't think because there was a pre-existing shack that was built against that wall on the top floor, just because that was there, I don't think that forms a precedent. And I think that the purpose of our rules are not rules, of our practice to ask applicants for townhouse modifications to leave the top floor unencumbered is a wise policy. It allows for everybody to read the volume of the original building, and I think that this obscures that. And so I would find it inappropriate at the fourth floor. Regarding the two-sided glass double-story modification at the base of the rear, I think it's appropriate. However, I think that there needs to be more masonry on the two remaining piers. I think that without that, it looks kind of like you're cutting the knees off the building. And I think it needs some substance. It should read as a whole in a mass as opposed to a lifting of the building. I think it's a little too close to the latter here.
Okay, thank you. And it is interesting to think about that top floor because it technically exists and they could keep it there. And so in some ways, even though most of the time we aren't looking at sort of comparing existing to proposed, but in some ways, I guess the question could be, is a glass cube that allows a view of the original rear wall an improvement over the existing condition, which can be retained. And I know normally appropriateness is not about whether something's an improvement, but I do think because they can keep the existing, it's sort of a question for us.
But it looks like such provisional construction. It looks like it would blow away in a stiff wind. And you know what? You want to keep it? Good luck. I think the minute you go out there and start to put in sheetrock, the thing's going to fall down. What it looks like. So I don't know. Yes, you're right. I mean, officially they could keep it.
Yeah.
I'd be happy to keep a shed that's going to blow away, if not tomorrow, then next year. And then you'll be able to see the rear facade properly.
Okay. All right, great. Thank you. Commissioner Jefferson.
This is a tough one for me. Okay, let me start from the beginning. Altered facade, removals of air conditioning vents, it makes the facade works much better. Installing new stoops, amazing. That front facade is elegant. Let me move on. Modify masonry opening, it's fine. The only issue I have with this whole project is the cubes and the modernist idea of removing substance to make a kind of an L plane L-shaped plane. And I think the comments I heard before where the corners came down and defined the corner of the L would make sense to me. The cubes, it's so modern. It's kind of reminds me of Paul Rudolph boxes. And I can see how it would work living there and looking out. But I'm wondering if we're starting something new here, if we accept the notion that you could look through these cubes and see the existing building, which I'm not quite sure you could do perceptually. If we start that and we start to just see cube boxes placed everywhere, we're going into a different direction. So I am about this. I don't know how to go on this one.
Yeah, and thinking about sort of the idea of cubes in lieu of preserving the top, where say there's an application where there is no existing addition at the top floor and they want one and they want to propose a cube in lieu of keeping it completely open with the notion that you could see through to the rear wall. I do think that's something to think about. I mean, I think the glass in some ways, to me, sort of reads kind of like sometimes the greenhouse additions that you would see on an L, but again, those tend to be one story. So I think it really kind of centers around Commissioner Goldblum's concern about just sort of covering that and obscuring that top floor.
But the glass they would have to use would be clear crystal glass, expensive glass, if they want to be able to see through this to the back wall.
Right.
They couldn't just use regular glass. It won't work. The glass the piano uses clear glass.
Okay. All right, Commissioner Holford Smith.
I'll start at the front. Little concerned about the mixing of styles, because I think that the current facade is a full design composition with that very large multi-paned window where the stoop is planning, the new door planning to go. But I guess if others are okay with the mixing of styles, I mean, we don't really know what that door would look like originally. There's sort of a guess that this is this kind of door. I'd prefer to see something more referential of the existing window, but I can go with the majority. At the rear, I think I'm in the same camp with Commissioner Goldblum on the top cube, recognizing that there is something there now. It's not normally something that we would approve to have an addition at the very top floor. And I don't really believe that you'll see through this glass once, it'll read as just sort of a dark cube, I think.
Right.
So I think I can accept the lower third floor cube, but not the top floor cube. And I agree with the increase of the masonry piers at the garden levels, but I'm okay with the lowering of the level.
Okay. Great, thank you. All right, Commissioner Chapin.
I agree with the changes to the front, and I think that the door is rather similar to the one at 18 West 9th, and I think I think it is something that I feel will look appropriate, and certainly the replacement of the stoop is excellent. On the back, I do appreciate the comments of previous commissioners. I'm kind of looking at this as a whole design composition from the basement up to the top, and I kind of, the way it works, I think I find appropriate, but I could go with the other commissioners feel that top cube needs to be removed. I kind of looked at it almost as how we let one of the windows be extended, and there's really no change to the back facade physically. So I could go along with this, but if others think we should remove the top cube, I could also support that.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Chu.
In regards to the front facade and the addition of the stoop, I support the stoop addition. I do think that is the original design of the facade, that you would come up to a parlor level. And I do think that they've executed a handsome facade. On the rear, I think, again, I agree with all the comments being made. In terms of the glass elements, I think my issue is also just looking overall, it feels like there are lots of pieces there. Again, there's a lot of different volumes and elements that I think complicate the reading. The top floor, I agree. I think it would be better without the top floor glass, but if that is something that is allowed to be retained, I would suggest maybe not stepping the volume back again and keeping it as a vertical 2-story volume. And I might suggest thinking about that elevation in relation to the opening down below. The more continuity I see in the new work, I feel then has a better dialogue with the existing, as opposed to several elements trying to be added onto an existing historic structure. So I would support also adding more masonry at the bottom. I think that there could be a cleaner elevation done there, looking at that side elevation. I also I know that there's being review done for the structure of the depression of the ground floor. I will just comment that looking at this section that was provided, you do need to do excavation to underpin and extend the cellar, it looked like in the drawings. And I would say that if not already being reviewed, you should definitely consider putting a dry well or something in that area of the patio, because with the type of rains that we get and flash floods, you will see that water come right into your house if you don't start to think about that. This lot doesn't have much of a yard, and it has no pervious surfaces from what I can see. And I think that will become an issue.
Okay, that's great advice. Thank you.
Yeah.
Commissioner Lutfi.
Okay. I think the work on the front of the building is wonderful. I mean, it's restoring the front stoop is great, as is taking out those HVAC grills and replacing them with brick. I don't really have a problem with the door. I think it speaks to some of the movement in the facade of the front. The back, I really appreciate your comments, Commissioner Chu, about the possible flooding, because I thought about that immediately, that if it rains there, what is going to happen with that water? So thank you for discussing some of the issues that need to be addressed further.
I'm speaking out of experience, by the way. I've done exactly a similar thing to my row house, and I had in that last crazy flash flood, everybody suffered. So it was just a warning ahead of time.
Yeah, I figured that you had
yes,
in some way had to deal with this. So I am sensitive to the fact on the back that there has been in the past structure at the top, where the L is, where the top cube is. And I guess I just think that, so I don't have a problem with the fact that there's structure there. I think one of the issues is I think we should not really speak or pretend that anybody is really going to see, is going to look through and see the original form of the building through that top cube. So let's just address the the cubes in and of themselves and how they relate to the rest of the structure. And I think the key here at the top and the bottom is to just put some masonry in here so that there can be glass at both levels. But I feel like they need some masonry surrounding that glass and closer to the facade and to the so that it actually reads like it's part of the form in the back. How that's done, it's, I'll leave to the designers, but I think that would help. And as I said, at the base as well, masonry.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Ginsburg.
So on the front facade, I'd prefer a simpler surround around the new proposed door, more like the existing window. But I think what's being proposed is fine. In the rear, they're not adding, they're just changing how they're building it. And quite honestly, it'd be good if it is, Commissioner Jefferson said it was both clear, non-reflective glass, so maybe you could see a little bit of the inside. And given that it's the existing massing, they could keep it as is, and I think what they're proposing is fine. And obviously, they've got to deal with the drainage in the sunken courtyard. I'm not sure I'd add brick on the existing rear facade, because right now that masonry is lining up with the pier above. So I think adding some more brick on the other pier and at the corner might help.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Chen.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of comments from the many commissioners. I think the front facade is fine, but obviously in the ideal world, if we can have it and Commissioner Hofer-Smith's way, that will be the ideal. But I think most commissioners are fine with the current proposal. The stoops are fine, and I'm glad Commissioner Chu picked up on the drainage issue. That's Mother Nature calling, and it's, if you want to underpin, you better make it even more secure. I think Commissioner Ginsburg's comment is well taken, which is that, it is an existing structure and you already have the thing. In addition, proof in rendering that there's a tree there that's blocking the view. So given that it's existing, I won't add more comments to the fire. I think that I will let the majority decide what should be done with the cubes.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Master.
I agree that the front facade and the stoop is fine. I think it's actually very attractive that the way that they did it. I'm actually going to go back and add the skylight. I believe that the removal of the skylight was also on the topic. I think that the skylight should be removed or can be removed. In terms of the lowering of the rear yard, the excavation, I also think that's fine. And I guess the most controversial topic is the 3rd and 4th floor glass cubes. I understand Commissioner Goldblum's point. However, the glass cubes, they don't bother me as much. I think they kind of almost balance out the windows on the bottom 2 floors. So I don't feel strongly one way or the other. I'm fine with letting them stay. But I will defer to the other commissioners or have the staff maybe work on some kind of a solution.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for bringing up the skylight. And so let me just, if any commissioner does have an issue with the skylight, feel free to raise your hand and change if you disagree that it can be removed. Okay, so I think we're all good on the skylight. So we're kind of split pretty evenly on the glass cube. And I think, one thing, yes, Commissioner Chu.
I just wanted to say one thing in terms of aesthetic materiality and detailing craftsmanship. The renderings, and I do commend the applicant for providing lots of drawings and diagrams because it's a complicated proposal and all these images really help us. But the renderings of the cubes here are very conceptual, and I don't know if this is I mean, in my mind, having a restored, beautiful historic house and then having a very finely detailed and constructed modern addition to it can work. But I can't tell if this is an aluminum system, which will look quite cheap, versus a very finely detailed steel, painted steel, small members and glass type detailing, which would give me a different impression of it. And if it is the latter, is the way I think I've been reading this. But if it's not, then I would think that the style is going to impact a lot my feeling about which way you go, whether it be a masonry approach or glass boxes.
And I thought he said it was aluminum in a
Oh.
aerodynamic finish.
Oh, is that what was said? Okay.
I thought so.
Okay, which is not the same as a
Right, and the
nicely detailed
detailing will
steel.
be more complicated than the simplicity of these renderings. A pitched roof, glass roof, all these things will start, the gutters and things will start to complicate the reading here.
Yeah, so I think there's sort of two options, and I'm trying to figure out what makes the most sense. I mean, we could approve it, eliminating the top cube, and I think we would have support for that for the existing with one cube, and this, they could work out the detailing with staff. And then if they choose to come back with more information and a more refined detail for the double cube, they could come back, since there does seem to be some openness or some support for the double cube here. And so I think that may be kind of the easiest thing to do. We'll do a motion, so that way, at least if they want to just pursue it with the one cube, they can go ahead and move. But if they want to come back, they can still come back to us. So Commissioner Goldblum, would you make a motion to approve this with the widening of the piers, the wrap window at the lower floors, and the elimination of the top cube? And then if they wish to pursue a double cube proposal, they can come back to us afterwards if they want.
Okay.
Okay.
Regarding 17 West 9th Street in the Greenwich Village Historic District, the application is to alter the facade, install a stoop, modify masonry openings, construct a rear yard addition, remove a studio skylight, and excavate the rear yard. I note that the building's style, scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Greenwich Village Historic District. I recommend approval with modifications. Finding that the facade was highly altered in 1918, including the removal of the stoop and parlor floor entry door and the installation of the bay window. Therefore, the reinstallation of the stoop and reintroduction of the parlor floor entrance will be in keeping with the history of change at this facade. That the placement, proportions, finishes, and details of the stoop and entrance will be compatible with the design of this house and in keeping with such aspects of other stoops and entrances found throughout the streetscape. And that the modifications to the areaway will not remove any significant historic fabric, and that the change in configuration and use of materials, including bluestone pavers, will be in keeping with the configuration of the materials of areaways typically found at buildings of this type, style, and age. Regarding the work at the rear of the building, I recommend approval with modifications, finding that the enlargement of the masonry openings to the lower floors of the rear facade and L extension will maintain a solid metal pier at the corner and mark the location of the missing floor level with a spandrel, helping to maintain a residential scale. That the reconstruction of the two-story addition at the roof, the historic rear L, that the reconstruction of an addition at the roof of the historic rear L will not eliminate any significant architectural features, that the reconstructed addition will not be visible from any thoroughfare, that a reconstructed addition will match the footprint and height of the existing addition, therefore will not further encroach on the central green space or diminish the unity of the row, that the design and materiality of the addition featuring glass and metal will help to differentiate the addition from the building and will reveal more of the historic brick wall at the upper floor, at the third floor, than the current addition, that the skylight will be to be removed as utilitarian, small in scale, not visible from a public thoroughfare. The rear yard is smaller than typical rear yards on the block. Therefore, the proposed excavation to lower the entire rear yard will not diminish the relationship of the rear yard to the central green space. That the proposed excavation and other structural work will be completed in compliance with DOB regulations under the supervision of a licensed professional engineer to protect the building's facades and those of adjacent buildings. And that the work will not detract from the special architectural and historic character of the building, streetscape, and the Greenwich Village Historic District. However, the applicant, I recommend the applicant will work with the staff to eliminate the top fourth floor glass addition and to examine the detailing of the third floor glass addition to maintain its correspondence with the proposed renderings, and that the applicant will work with staff to increase the dimension of masonry at the lower two levels where the wraparound glass wall is introduced.
Sorry, I'm muted. Commissioner Jefferson, would you second that motion?
So second.
All right, and Mark or John, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Chu,
Aye.
Commissioner Ginsburg,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Holford Smith,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi,
Aye.
Commissioner Master.
Aye.
10 in favor, none opposed. The motion passes.
John, Commissioner Bland is back.
Ah.
But not voting.
Thank you.
I didn't see enough of it to vote.
Okay, so thank you. You can continue to work with the staff, and if you do want to come back and represent a two-story cube based on the existing two-story volumes, or shifting them and restudying the materials details of them, you're welcome to do that. Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move to the next item,
you.
which is the last item before lunch. We're a little behind schedule, but hopefully this one will not delay us too much.
Okay, and before I do read in that item, I do want to note that the item after this one, item number 6, has been withdrawn at the last minute, so we will not be presenting that today. That will be pursued at staff level. That was item 6, 1155 Broadway. I'll note that again once we start after lunch, but just noting it now for the record. Okay, so this item is item 5, LPC 23-06488, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, block 751, lot 76, 296 to 300 9th Avenue, the Church of the Holy Apostles, individual landmark. This is a church building designed by Menard Lefevre and built in 1846 to 1848, with an eastern extension built in 1853 to 54, and transepts designed by Charles Babcock of Richard Upjohn and Son and built in 1858. The application is to install light poles.
Okay, commissioners, the applicants have entered the hearing. Christina, you now have control of the presentation. You just need to click on your screen. And then you can advance the slides using your arrow keys or your mouse. The project team may begin, but please state your name for the record before you do so.
Hello, my name is Christina Redmond. I'm from Midtown Preservation, Architecture and Engineering.
and we are the building's restoration consultants. We have been retained to prepare presentation materials for lamppost assemblies designed by the lighting consultants, Tirschwell and Company, Architectural Lighting Design. And I want to mention that currently the building is undergoing upgrades to the exterior envelope, mechanical systems, and other exterior light fixtures, all approved at staff level. These efforts are being led by Mikulski Studio Architecture and the owner's representative, J.S. Hogden Incorporated. And the construction work will be performed by Calpe Contracting. Currently, the church is poorly lit and appears abandoned at night. And the lamppost assemblies will include a downward facing lamp to provide general site illumination for security purposes, as well as projector heads at the top to illuminate the steeple surfaces. There will be 4 lamppost assemblies. The one at the bottom right, the southeast corner, is not subject to public hearing review. That's only staff level. The lamppost assemblies will be approximately 5 to 6 feet from the property line, which is also the perimeter fencing. And right now the fixtures, let me see. The fixtures will be painted black to match the perimeter wrought iron fencing. And we felt that the simplicity of the post would be of a neutral aesthetics that would not compete or detract from the existing architecture. And I want to mention that combining the steeple projector heads and the downward facing security lights into one assembly allows the church to utilize Department of Homeland Security funding for the installations. I also want to mention that the church will be installing some low profile in-ground wall washer fixtures approved at staff level that will highlight the architecture of the church along the north side, approximately 2 feet from the building. And they will also be replacing the exterior sconces at the front of the building with wrought iron fixtures to mimic what was observed in some historic photographs from the 1920s. You can see here, these images were created with Photoshop. So this is the lamppost assembly here. It's not aimed precisely at the steeple, but again, this was done using some simplistic Photoshop software. These images here were created by Tirschwell Company. They obtained some steeple projector fixtures on loan from the manufacturer. I want to point out that these images are photographs taken with only one steeple projector. So the end goal is to illuminate all sides of the steeple once they have the 4 steeple projectors in place. And once they can work with the installer to aim and adjust the projector heads appropriately. I want to mention also that the aesthetics of the post, we felt that the visors on the projector heads were highly functional, and Kathleen Taylor from Tirschwell and Company, the lighting consultant, can speak further on the technical aspects of the fixtures, which are exterior grade, but we did not want to create a hodgepodge assembly, so the style of the post was very simple. And any questions regarding the church facility can be addressed by Michael Otley, the Chief Operating Officer, or Reverend Anna Pearson. And that includes the presentation currently. I want to mention that in regards to the post placement, the posts at the north side of the property will be set within a garden area, and the posts at the southwest corner will be set in some concrete paving.
Okay, thank you. And we do have a question. Commissioner Goldblum, please go ahead.
This is more of a, I don't know, maybe Mark would know the answer to this, or or the commissioner bar. Is there a night sky rule, like a dark sky code in New York City?
I was going to ask a similar, there is not, but I was going to ask the question if you looked and can comply with dark sky standards.
Yeah, you can't with this. I mean,
You can't, it probably would be, the only way you could is if you could mount fixtures across the street higher on other buildings to go down instead of up.
All right, thanks.
Right, Commissioner Ginsburg, did you have another question?
Well, I just wanted to ask if they had looked at any way to meet dark skies with the proposed lighting.
So if the applicants want to respond to that.
I'm not aware of any dark sky requirements. I do know that I don't know if Kathleen Taylor from Churchwell is available, but in speaking with her, from what I understand, the fixtures have the steeple projectors have visors, and so the target point, because it's so specific and located at such a distance, the size of the projector heads and the visor flaps limit any overwash onto other buildings or other sites. So the only receiving surface of the light fixture should be the steeple and no other surfaces.
Hi, Kathleen, just a comment as well. We were not quite sure.
Can you just actually state your name for the record as well? Thanks.
Hi, Kathleen Taylor. Yes, the Churchwell and Company. We were not aware if there were particular sky requirements, but to exactly what Christina was saying is the form factors, the way they're shape built, and kind of the size and aesthetics of them are entirely to be the function of being so specifically optical to only frame the steeple and to avoid any kind of spill off into neighboring buildings. And to be able to create this kind of scale and magnitude to reach this far kind of and be a permanent installation exterior fixture is one of the only fixtures available. So that's kind of how we ended on this particular one.
Thank you.
And I think, from a regulatory perspective, the commission has historically, when we've looked at lighting, really looked at the fixtures and not the quality or type of the light or the wattage, because I think that is something that is regulated elsewhere, but also hard for us to enforce. So our focus has really been on the placement of the fixtures and its impact or relationship to the historic features of the building or district. All right, other questions? All right, let's move to public testimony. If you're in the meeting and would like to speak on this item, please raise your hand so we can identify you, and I'll turn it over to Gregory Kalla to take us through the testimony.
Thank you, Chair Carroll. We received a couple of signups beforehand, so we'll be going through those first. The first signup is Lucy Levine from the Historic Districts Council. So I'll be promoting you to panelist right now, Lucy Levine. And if you could please state your name for the record and unmute your line, you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Hi, Commissioners. My name is Lucy Levine. I'm speaking on behalf of the Historic Districts Council. HDC appreciates the church's need for lighting, and we find the steeple illumination both appropriate and beautiful. We hope that the church will find a solution for surface lighting that is equally sensitive instead of the institutional lampposts currently proposed. Thank you.
You're
Gregory,
muted.
you're muted.
Yes, thank you. And we do have Jeremy Woodoff signed up, and I see that he might be experiencing some difficulties. I will try to promote him to panelist right now. Okay. So Jeremy Woodoff, if you're with us, please unmute your line and state your name for the record, and you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm Jeremy Woodoff, speaking for the Victorian Society, New York. Before reading our prepared testimony, I need to say that when our committee reviewed this project, We weren't aware that there was actually a comprehensive lighting proposal. All we saw were the four proposed posts for the steeple and security lighting. So really, it was impossible for us to prepare testimony that completely reflects the actual project. But now I'll read the testimony we were able to prepare. The proposed lighting hardware is what one would expect from the Department of Homeland Security, which apparently is funding this installation. The posts and light fixtures do nothing to improve the setting of this mid-19th century church and aren't harmonious with it. Beyond that, this seems to us to be a lost opportunity. We think the upper part of the steeple is perhaps the least interesting part of the building. On the other hand, the church's fine brickwork, recessed arched openings, heavily bracketed eaves, and the tower with its reverse OG arches could all be enhanced by lighting with discrete LED fixtures. We think that type of lighting would go further towards making the church feel active, welcoming, and better lit. The proposed motion-activated lights to us send a message of potential danger. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much for your testimony. I am looking through the attendees list now, and I do not see any further hands raised. So I will just note for the record that Manhattan Community Board 4 recommends approval. And I'll bring it back to you, Chair Carroll.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'd like to turn back to the applicants and ask if you'd like to respond to the comments we've heard.
So I am not as involved with the funding. I know that the decisions right now have a lot to do with deadlines on Department of Homeland Security funding. As far as the architecture, I would say I think that all parties, agree that there's some beautiful elements of the building. There's only so much they can do at this time based on the available funding. I will say that Churchwell did design some very nice fixtures at the north side of the property. They're very discreet and they just provide light wall wash on the walls, and they do highlight some of the stained glass windows, and additionally the exterior wrought iron sconces towards the front do replicate some the wrought iron fixtures that were in place one time at the building. There's also some interior light fixtures at the bell tower, and I think the interior light fixtures and the exterior fixtures approved at staff level will highlight the structure pretty nicely, based on the available funds that they have.
Yeah. Okay, so, but the comments on the 3 lampposts that are before us today, I think had to do with their sort of industrial character. And I don't know if you want to speak to that. Is it their proximity from the building itself in the urban context, or do you want to?
Yeah, there are a lot of, street lamps, parking lots and whatnot, very close to the site. I think we felt, by selecting a post with a certain ornamentation or a certain historic image to it wouldn't match with the projector style, maybe theater style projector heads. We did research some theater style lighting, and it wasn't common for them to incorporate a decorative post because they're intended to be highly functional, and we were limited as far as what was exterior grade fixture or lamp heads.
Okay. All right, commissioners, any final questions? All right, we're gonna start to unmute now and move to our discussion. So if you can do that, Commissioner Holford Smith, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Thank you. And Vice Chair Bland, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay. So the hearing is closed, and as we've heard, there are other fixtures that meet the rules and are being approved at staff level. The 3 fixtures that are before us are these 3 posts on the out in the area way around the church. And they are, I think are 10 feet tall, very simple black poles that have a sort of hooded 19, it looks like the total height of the fixture itself on top of the pole adds an additional 19 inches. And so we'll begin our discussion. Commissioner Jefferson, would you like to start this one?
Sure. It seems to me that the pole is okay. I mean, the idea of having a ornamental pole with modern fixtures on it just seems odd too. So there's only 4 of them, and they're contrasting with the fence, and it's just minor. I can approve this.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Chapin?
Yeah, hold on a minute. Am I muted? I can't tell.
No, we hear you.
Fine, thank you. I think it's fine. It's a minimal intrusion. It's not destroying any historic fabric, and it's going to help us to help both the church to have a better security situation and also illuminate the church. And I don't think perhaps there could be a better light pole, but I think these are fairly minimalist. So unless someone else has a better suggestion for the pole, I'm fine with it.
Yeah, and I do think Commissioner Jefferson has a point that to do something very ornamental under that hood is a
yes.
I
agree. I do agree with that completely. Yes.
Commissioner Holford Smith.
I can find this acceptable. I think the simple pole, you won't notice it as you're walking along. And I think that the projector type light fixture is fine. So I can find this acceptable.
Okay. Commissioner Lutfi.
I'm fine with it. It's very simple and it helps with security.
Okay. Commissioner Bland.
Likewise, fine. I'll recall also many years ago, we approved similar kinds of very simple light poles in front of the New York Public Library.
Yes.
In order to illuminate it. And again, I'll stress, we're only approving the pole, not the light itself, or even the idea of lighting the building, which I will note also is an interesting idea that the Victorian Society had, but we're not responsible for that. But it's good that they brought that up. Menard Lefevre was a very important architect, and his crowning jewels, if not this one, maybe I don't think he thought it was even, is in Brooklyn Heights at the corner of Montague and Clinton, called the St. Anne's Church these days, Church of the Holy Trinity, which has the earliest stained glass windows in America in it. So just a little sidebar there.
Thank you. Commissioner Chu.
I think it's appropriate.
Commissioner Ginsburg.
In general, I think it's appropriate, although I'm a believer in dark skies. The fact that they've done cutoffs to minimize the light pollution seems acceptable to me, so I would approve it.
Okay, great, thank you. Commissioner Goldblum.
Appropriate.
Commissioner Master.
Yes, I think it's minimal and discreet. I think it's appropriate.
Okay, and Commissioner Chen.
Likewise, yeah.
Okay, so I think we have a consensus. Commissioner Jefferson, would you make the motion?
Sure. In the matter of LPC 23-06488, 296 309th Avenue, the Church of the Holy Apostle, individual landmarks. Applications to install lighting poles. I note that the proposed lighting installation is reversible, simple in design, and will not call undue attention to itself, that the installation of a single light pole at each corner of the site will allow for the church spire to be illuminated without fixtures being attached to the historic fabric, and that the proposed work will not detract from the significant architectural features of the church, building, or the landmark site.
Thank you. And Commissioner Goldblum, would you second that motion?
Second.
All right, and Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Chu,
Aye.
Commissioner Ginsburg,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi,
Aye.
Commissioner Master,
Aye.
Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
With 11 in favor, none opposed, the motion passes.
All right, that's approved. Thank you. All right, so that concludes our morning session. We're now going to take a half-hour break for lunch, and we will resume at 1:30. So we'll ask all members of the public to voluntarily exit the meeting at this time so that we can lock the meeting and you won't have technical difficulties when you rejoin, if you choose to rejoin this afternoon. So we will see everybody at 1:30. Thank you.